Every child is a blessing from the moon goddess. That's what Alpha Rowan told his pack the night his son was born. But Theodore Garrison would learn that blessings only count when you're perfect enough to deserve them. The Silvercrest pack had waited 17 years for an heir. 17 years of prayers, rituals, and desperate pleas to the moon goddess. When Theodore finally arrived under the full moon's silver glow, the pack's celebration shook the mountain. But the howls of joy died the moment they realized the Alpha's son couldn't hear them. Chapter 1. The Silent Heir. The midwife's hands trembled as she clapped them beside the newborn's ear. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. Theodore's gray eyes, bright as moonlight, tracked the movement of her hands, but his tiny face showed no startle, no reaction to the sharp sounds that should have made him flinch. Again, Alpha Rowan commanded, his voice tight. The massive man stood in the doorway of the birthing chamber, his black hair still damp from shifting back to human form. He'd run 17 miles through the forest when the labor pains began, his wolf racing faster than it ever had before. Test him again. The midwife, an elderly woman named Iris, who'd delivered 3 generations of Silvercrest wolves, repeated the test. She snapped her fingers, clicked her tongue, even dropped a metal tray beside the infant's head. Theodore didn't blink. He simply stared up at the ceiling, his small fist curling and uncurling, reaching for something no one else could see. "I'm sorry, Alpha," Iris whispered, her voice breaking. "He cannot hear." The words hung in the air like poison. Luna Garrison, Rowan's mate, and the pack's Luna lay exhausted in the bed, her auburn hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. "No," she breathed. "No. That's impossible. The moon goddess wouldn't." "The moon goddess has spoken," came a cold voice from the shadows. Elder Mira stepped forward, her silver hair braided with wolf bones and moonstone beads. She was the pack's spiritual leader, the one who interpreted the goddess's will, and right now, her weathered face was carved with disappointment. "A deaf wolf cannot lead," Elder Mira said flatly. "He cannot hear the pack link, cannot hear enemies approaching, cannot hear his own wolf when it's time to shift." She looked at the baby with something like pity. "This child is incomplete." "He's our son," Luna's voice cracked, but even she couldn't hide the devastation in her eyes as she looked at her baby boy. The child she'd waited 17 years to hold. Alpha Rowan said nothing. He simply stood there, his massive frame filling the doorway, his jaw clenched so tight the muscles jumped beneath his skin. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "Prepare the Omega quarters," Iris gasped. "Alpha, you can't mean. My son will be raised in the main house," Rowan interrupted, but his eyes told a different story. "But he will not be presented as heir. Not until..." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Until what? Until he was fixed? Until he became what he could never be? Luna began to weep, and the sound was worse than any howl of pain Iris had ever heard. Theodore Garrison learned to read lips before he learned to walk. He learned to feel vibrations through the floor before he understood that other wolves heard through their ears. And he learned that disappointment had a specific look, the way his father's shoulders dropped every time Theodore entered a room. Again, the combat instructor barked, his mouth forming the word with exaggerated precision. Theodore could see the man's frustration in the tightness around his eyes, the way his lips pressed together when he thought Theodore wasn't looking. Theodore adjusted his stance, his muscles coiled and ready. Around him, the other young wolves of the pack watched with a mixture of pity and disdain. His half-brother, Thorn, born 3 years after Theodore to Alpha Rowan's second mate after Luna died of a broken heart, smirked from the sidelines. Thorn was everything Theodore wasn't. Golden-haired, sharp-eared, perfect, the pack's true heir in everything but birth order. The instructor lunged. Theodore felt the vibration through the training ground floor a split second too late. He dodged, but not fast enough. The instructor's fist caught his shoulder, spinning him around. "Dead," the instructor signed, his hands moving in the language Theodore had learned from books and observation. "If I'd been an enemy, you'd be dead." "He can't hear them coming," Thorn called out, his voice carrying across the training ground. Theodore couldn't hear the words, but he could read his brother's lips, see the cruel amusement dancing in his golden eyes. What good is an alpha who can't protect his pack? The other young wolves laughed. Theodore felt the vibration of it through the ground, felt the way the air seemed to shift with their mockery. "Enough." Alpha Rowan's command cut through the noise. Theodore didn't need to hear it, he felt his father's presence like a physical weight, the way all wolves felt their alpha's authority. Rowan approached, his face carved from stone. He was older now, gray threading through his black hair, but he was still massive, still powerful, still everything an alpha should be. Theodore, his father signed, his movements stiff and unpracticed. Rowan had learned to sign for his son, but he hated it. Theodore could see it in every sharp, frustrated gesture. You must try harder. I am trying, Theodore wanted to sign back. I'm trying with everything I have. But he simply nodded, his gray eyes meeting his father's for a brief moment before Rowan looked away. He always looked away. Thorn will lead the patrol tonight, Rowan announced to the training ground. Theodore will remain behind. The words, even read through lip reading and context, were a knife to the chest. Theodore was 18 now, fully grown, stronger than half the warriors in the pack. But he would never lead a patrol, never command respect, never be trusted with anything that mattered. Because he couldn't hear. Theodore retreated to the one place in the pack house where he felt invisible rather than pitied: the library. It was an old room, dusty and forgotten, filled with books about pack history and wolf lore that no one read anymore. He was running his fingers along the spines, finding comfort in the texture of old leather, when he felt a change in the air pressure, the subtle shift that meant someone had entered the room. Theodore turned. She stood in the doorway, her arms full of fresh linens. An Omega. He could tell by the plain gray dress, the way she kept her eyes lowered, the silver collar around her neck that marked her as the lowest rank in the pack hierarchy. But when she glanced up just for a moment, Theodore felt something shift inside his chest. Her eyes were violet. Not blue, not purple, but true violet, like the wildflowers that grew in the high mountain meadows. They were the most unusual eyes he'd ever seen, and they looked at him without pity, without disappointment, without any of the emotions he was used to seeing. She simply looked at him like he was normal. I'm sorry, she signed, her movements fluid and natural. I didn't know anyone was here. Theodore blinked in shock. She could sign. Not the stilted, frustrated signing his father used, but proper signing, as natural as breathing. You know sign language? He signed back, his heart suddenly racing. A small smile touched her lips. My mother was deaf. She taught me before she died. What's your name? She hesitated, and for a moment Theodore thought she wouldn't answer. Omegas weren't supposed to speak to the Alpha family without permission, but then her hands moved again, graceful and sure. Lyra, I know who you are, she signed, and there was something in her expression that made him pause. Not pity. Not disappointment. Something else entirely. Everyone knows who you are. Theodore Garrison. She set down the linens on a nearby table, and as she did, something fell from her pocket. A small leather pouch, worn and old, with strange symbols stitched into the surface. Theodore bent to pick it up, but Lyra snatched it away with a speed that surprised him. For just a second, he saw something flash in those violet eyes: fear, or maybe desperation. What is that? He signed. Nothing. Her response was quick, final. Just something my mother left me. But Theodore had seen the symbols on the pouch. They were old wolf runes, the kind used in the ancient times, before the packs settled in the mountains. The kind that spoke of magic and mystery, and things the elders claimed were lost to history. Before he could ask more, Lyra bowed her head and hurried from the room, leaving behind the scent of lavender and something else, something wild and electric that made Theodore's wolf stir for the first time in his life. He stood there alone in the library, his hand still outstretched where she'd stood moments before, and wondered why an Omega Maid would carry ancient wolf magic in a leather pouch, and why, for the first time in 18 years, his father's disappointment didn't feel like the most important thing in the world. Chapter 2. The Forbidden Connection. Theodore returned to the library the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. He told himself it was because he enjoyed the quiet, the way the dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight, the smell of old books and forgotten history. He told himself it had nothing to do with the possibility that a certain Omega Maid might appear with her arms full of linens and her violet eyes that looked at him like he mattered. He was a terrible liar, even to himself. On the fourth day, she came. Lyra pushed through the heavy oak door, her gray dress swishing softly around her ankles. She wasn't surprised to see him this time. She simply set down her basket of cleaning supplies and signed, "You're here again. The library is quiet." Theodore signed back, his heart doing something stupid in his chest. "I can think here." "Most wolves don't think much at all," Lyra signed, a hint of amusement playing at the corners of her mouth. "They just follow orders and howl at the moon." Theodore felt a laugh bubble up in his throat, an actual laugh, something he hadn't experienced in months. "You're not like most omegas." Her hands stilled for a moment. Then she signed, carefully. "And you're not like most alpha sons." "Because I'm broken?" "Because you're curious." Lyra moved to dust the bookshelves, her movements graceful despite the heavy work. Broken things don't read ancient pack histories. They don't spend hours learning about the old ways when everyone else has forgotten them. Theodore stood, moving closer. "You've been watching me." "Everyone watches you, Theodore Garrison." She turned to face him, and he could see something fierce burning behind those unusual eyes. "The question is, what are you looking for in these books?" He hesitated. The truth felt dangerous, like exposing a wound he'd kept carefully bandaged. But there was something about Lyra that made him want to be honest. "I'm looking for wolves like me," he signed. "Deaf wolves. Wolves who couldn't hear but still survived. Still led. Still mattered." His hands faltered. "But there's nothing. It's like I'm the first wolf in history to be born this way." Lyra's expression shifted into something that looked like pain. She glanced toward the door, as if checking to make sure they were truly alone, then signed, "That's because you're looking in the wrong books." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, she reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out the leather pouch, the one she'd dropped during their first meeting. The one with the ancient runes stitched across its surface. Theodore's breath caught. Up close he could see the symbols more clearly. Moon phases, wolf tracks, and something that looked like sound waves carved into existence. "My mother," Lyra signed slowly, "was not just deaf. She was something else. Something the elders would have killed her for if they'd known." "What was she?" Lyra's hands trembled slightly as she signed. "A lunar healer. From the old bloodlines. Before the pack split and forgot the ancient magic." She looked at him with an intensity that made his wolf stir. "My mother could hear everything, not through her ears, but through the moon's light. She could sense vibrations in the air, feel the heartbeat of the earth, understand the language of the wind." Theodore felt his world tilting. "That's impossible. The elders say that kind of magic died out centuries ago." "The elders lie about many things." Lyra's hands moved sharply, angrily. "They lie because power built on truth is harder to maintain than power built on fear." She took a breath, steadying herself. "My mother taught me everything before she died. Every ritual, every technique, every secret the old healers knew." "Why are you telling me this?" Theodore signed, his heart racing. "If the elders found out, because you deserve to know that being deaf doesn't make you broken." Lyra stepped closer, and Theodore could smell that lavender and lightning scent again. "It makes you different, and different wolves were once the most powerful of all." She opened the leather pouch. Inside was a collection of items that made no sense together. Small crystals that caught the light, dried herbs he didn't recognize, a vial of silver liquid that seemed to glow from within, and a smooth stone, carved with the same symbols as the pouch. "What is all this?" "Tools," Lyra signed. "My mother used them to enhance her other senses, to connect with the vibrations of the world in ways hearing wolves never could." She picked up the carved stone, holding it out to him. "This is a resonance stone. When held during meditation, it amplifies your connection to the earth's vibrations." Theodore stared at the stone, afraid to hope. "You think this could help me?" "I think," Lyra signed carefully, "that you've been trying to be something you're not your entire life. A hearing wolf who happens to be deaf." Her violet eyes locked with his. "But what if you stop trying to hear, and instead learn to sense the world in ways no other wolf can?" They met in secret after that, late at night, when the pack house was asleep and even the night patrol had moved to the far boundaries of the territory. Lyra would slip into the library, and Theodore would be waiting. She taught him things the elders had never mentioned, how to place his hands flat against the floor and feel the vibrations of footsteps 3 rooms away, how to sense changes in air pressure that signaled someone's approach, how to read the subtle shifts, in a person's stance that revealed their intentions before they moved. Your wolf is frustrated, Lyra signed one night. 3 weeks into their secret lessons, they were sitting cross-legged on the library floor, the resonant stone between them. I can see it in the way you hold your shoulders. Like something inside you is trying to break free. Theodore's hands moved reluctantly. I've never shifted. Not once. Lyra's eyes widened. Never? But you're 18. Most wolves shift for the first time at 16. His signs were sharp, bitter. The elders say it's because my wolf knows I can't hear it, so it won't come forward. They say I'm incomplete. He looked away. Maybe they're right. They're wrong. Lyra's hands moved with absolute certainty. Your wolf is there. I can sense it. Strong and waiting. How would you know? Instead of answering, Lyra did something that made Theodore's breath stop. She pulled down the collar of her dress just enough to reveal the silver band around her neck, the Omega collar. But beneath it, hidden from view unless you knew to look, was a mark. A crescent moon, surrounded by stars, tattooed in ink that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. Because I'm not just an Omega, she signed. I'm a lunar healer's daughter, and I can sense the truth that everyone else is too blind to see. She looked at him with those impossible violet eyes. Your wolf isn't silent, Theodore. It's just speaking a language you haven't learned to hear yet. Everything shattered the night Thorn found them. Theodore felt at first the vibration of heavy footsteps in the hallway, moving too fast, too angry. He grabbed Lyra's arm, signing frantically. Someone's coming. She barely had time to shove the leather pouch back into her pocket before the library door slammed open. Thorn stood in the doorway, his golden hair wild, his eyes bright with triumph and malice. Behind him were 2 of his friends' beta wolves who followed him like loyal dogs. Theodore couldn't hear what Thorn said, but he could read the cruel twist of his half-brother's lips. Well, well. The deaf prince and the Omega whore. How touching. Lyra stood quickly, her head bowed. Her hands clasped in the submissive posture Omegas were required to maintain around higher-ranked wolves. But Theodore could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw clenched. Leave her alone, Theodore signed, knowing Thorn could barely understand the language. He stepped between his brother and Lyra, his body a shield. Thorn laughed. Theodore could see his shoulders shaking with it and said something else. One of his friends translated in rough signs. Your brother says you can't even defend yourself, let alone an Omega slut. Rage flooded through Theodore like fire. His hands curled into fists, and for the first time in his life, he felt something else stirring inside him. Something wild and furious and desperate to break free. His wolf. Thorn must have seen it in his eyes because he stopped laughing. He took a step forward, his own wolf rising to the challenge, his body beginning the shift. Don't. Lyra signed desperately behind Theodore. But Theodore wasn't listening. He could feel it now, the presence inside him that had been silent for 18 years. It wasn't silent at all. It had been there the entire time. Waiting, watching, learning, and it was done waiting. Theodore felt his bones begin to crack and reshape. Felt fur ripple across his skin. Felt his senses explode outward in a way that had nothing to do with hearing. He could feel the vibrations of 3 heartbeats in the room besides his own. Could sense the subtle shifts in air currents as Thorn moved. Could taste the fear and surprise rolling off his half-brother in waves. The shift took him in seconds faster than it should have for a first time. And when Theodore stood on 4 legs instead of 2, he was massive, larger than Thorn's wolf, larger than most adult wolves in the pack. His fur was silver gray, like moonlight given form. And his eyes, those same gray eyes that had watched the world in silence for 18 years, burned with an inner light that made Thorn's friends step back. Thorn shifted fully, his golden wolf snarling. Theodore couldn't hear the sound, but he could feel the vibration of it through the floor, could sense the challenge in every line of his brother's body. They lunged at the same moment. Theodore moved on instinct, on the weeks of lessons Lyra had given him about reading vibrations and anticipating movement. He felt Thorn's paws hit the ground, felt the shift in air pressure. As his brother leaped and moved aside at the perfect moment, Thorn crashed into a bookshelf. Books tumbled down around him. Theodore didn't wait. He pounced, his massive weight driving Thorn to the ground, his jaws closing around his half-brother's throat in the traditional gesture of dominance. He could have bitten down. could have ended this rivalry here and now. But he didn't. Instead, he released Thorn and shifted back to human form, his body remembering how even though he'd never done it before, he stood there, naked and powerful and completely in control, and signed something he knew Thorn's friends would have to translate: touch her again. And next time I won't stop. Thorn shifted back, his hand at his throat, his eyes wide with shock and something that might have been fear. He opened his mouth to speak, probably to threaten, to belittle, to regain some sense of control. But then Alpha Rowan appeared in the doorway. Theodore's father stood there, his face carved from granite, his eyes moving from his naked son to the destroyed library to Lyra cowering in the corner to Thorn's bleeding throat. "My office," Rowan signed to Theodore, his hands sharp and furious. Now. And Theodore knew, with a sinking certainty, that everything was about to get much, much worse. Chapter 3. The Alpha's Judgment. Alpha Rowan's office smelled of cedar and old leather, since Theodore had learned to identify through memory rather than direct experience. He stood in the center of the room, still naked from his shift, while his father paced like a caged animal. Theodore could feel each footstep through the floor heavy, deliberate, angry. Finally, Rowan stopped and turned to face him. His hands moved in sharp, aggressive signs. 18 years. 18 years I've waited for you to shift. And you choose now? In a fight with your brother over an Omega. He was going to hurt her. Theodore signed back, his hands steady despite the fear coursing through him. She is an Omega. Rowan's signs were so forceful they were almost violent. Property of the pack, less than nothing. And you. He stopped, his jaw working. You attacked your brother, the pack's true heir. Do you understand what you've done? Something cold settled in Theodore's chest. True heir, he signed slowly. So it's official now? You're just saying it out loud? Rowan's face hardened. You were never going to lead this pack, Theodore. You know that. You've always known that. Because I can't hear. Because you can't lead. Rowan's hands flew with frustration. A deaf alpha is a dead alpha, and a dead alpha means a dead pack. He turned away, gripping the edge of his desk. I did everything I could for you. Trained you, protected you. Let you live in the main house when the elders wanted you sent away at birth. How generous. Theodore signed, bitterness flooding through him. Rowan spun back. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for you. The political capital I've spent defending your existence. The challenges I've faced from other alphas who see you as weakness. His signs became slower, heavier. Your mother died of a broken heart because she couldn't accept what you were. Don't make her death meaningless by throwing away what little future you have left. The words hit Theodore like physical blows. His mother dead because of him. Because he wasn't perfect. Because he was born wrong. What do you want from me? Theodore signed, his hands trembling now. Rowan studied him for a long moment. Then his hands moved with terrible finality. You will stay away from the Omega. Completely. No contact, no meetings, nothing. Her name is Lyra. I don't care what her name is. Rowan's face reddened. She's filling your head with dangerous ideas, making you think you're something you're not. She's teaching me how to survive as what I am, Theodore signed desperately. She's shown me that being deaf doesn't mean being broken. It does mean broken in this world. Rowan interrupted. And the sooner you accept that, the better. He took a breath, forcing calm. You will apologize to Thorn, publicly. You will submit to him, as the pack's heir. And you will never speak to that Omega again. And if I refuse? The silence stretched between them, not the comfortable silence Theodore had known his whole life, but something sharp and dangerous. Then I will have no choice but to exile you, Rowan signed, and Theodore could see the truth in his father's eyes. He would do it. He would send his own son away rather than deal with the embarrassment, the political complications, the reality of a deaf alpha's child. I'll accept exile. Theodore signed, before he could stop himself. Rowan's eyes widened. You don't mean that. I do. Theodore's hands were steady now, certain. If staying means pretending I'm nothing, means abandoning the only person who's ever treated me like I matter, then I don't want to stay. You're being a fool. Maybe. Theodore met his father's gaze without flinching. But I'd rather be a fool with dignity than a coward with a title I'll never earn. For a moment, just a brief, flickering moment, Theodore thought he saw something like respect in his father's eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by cold resolve. You have until sunrise, Rowan signed. Pack your things and leave the territory. If you're found within our boundaries after dawn, you'll be treated as a rogue. He turned his back, dismissing Theodore like he would any other pack member. I'll tell the pack you left of your own accord. It's kinder than the truth. Theodore stood there for a heartbeat longer, memorizing the line of his father's shoulders, the gray threading through his dark hair, the weight of disappointment that had defined their entire relationship. Then he turned and left, closing the door on the only home he'd ever known. Theodore's room felt foreign as he packed, 18 years of life, and everything that mattered fit into a single backpack: clothes, a few books, the resonant stone Lyra had given him, wrapped carefully in cloth. He was folding his last shirt when he felt the vibration of footsteps in the hallway. Too light to be his father or Thorn, too quick to be a guard. Lyra appeared in his doorway, her violet eyes wide with panic. "You're leaving," she signed. "Not a question. My father gave me until sunrise." Theodore continued packing, not trusting himself to look at her. "It's better this way. Thorn gets what he's always wanted. And I." Lyra crossed the room in 3 steps and grabbed his hands, stopping his signs mid-sentence. "You get thrown to the wolves. Alone. In a world that doesn't understand what you are. I'll survive. You'll die." Her hands trembled against his. "Rogue wolves don't last long. And deaf rogue wolves." She couldn't finish the thought. Theodore finally looked at her, really looked at her. Even in her plain gray omega dress, even with the silver collar around her neck marking her as property, she was beautiful, strong, real. "Come with me," he signed impulsively. Lyra's breath caught. "What? Come with me," he repeated, his hands more certain now. "We'll find another pack, one that doesn't care about ranks and bloodlines and ancient prejudices." He cupped her face, feeling the warmth of her skin. "We'll figure it out together." For a moment, hope blazed in Lyra's eyes. But then it died, replaced by something that looked like grief. "I can't," she signed, pulling away. "Why not?" "Because I'm not." She stopped, her hands faltering. "There are things you don't know about me, Theodore. Things that make leaving impossible." "Then tell me." Lyra looked toward the window, toward the full moon rising over the mountains. When she turned back, her expression was torn. "Do you remember what I told you about my mother? About lunar healers?" "Yes. She wasn't just teaching me healing techniques." Lyra's hands moved slowly, as if each sign caused her pain. "She was preparing me for something, a responsibility that's been passed down through her bloodline for generations." Theodore felt dread pooling in his stomach. "What responsibility?" Lyra reached up and touched the silver collar around her neck. With a small movement, she triggered a hidden catch. The collar fell away, revealing the full extent of the tattoo beneath, not just a crescent moon and stars, but an entire constellation that wrapped around her throat like a living thing. The markings glowed softly in the moonlight, pulsing with power that made Theodore's wolf stir with recognition. "I'm not just a lunar healer's daughter," Lyra signed, her hands shaking. "I'm a moonbound, the last of my line. And every full moon, I have to perform a ritual to keep the pack's connection to the moon goddess intact." She looked at him with desperate eyes. "If I leave, the entire Silvercrest pack loses its power. Wolves won't be able to shift. Children will be born human. Everything your father has built will crumble." The revelation hit Theodore like an avalanche. "You're saying you're bound here? Magically? Spiritually? Magically? Completely?" Lyra's signs were sharp with frustration. "The ritual can only be performed on pack lands, at the sacred altar in the deep forest, and it can only be performed by someone of my bloodline." She grabbed his hands again. "Don't you understand? I'm not an Omega because I'm weak. I'm an Omega because your father and the elders need me powerless. If the pack knew what I really was, they'd either worship me or kill me. The collar, the Omega status, it's all to keep me controlled. Then break free," Theodore signed desperately. "Let the pack fall. They've done nothing but hurt us both, and condemn hundreds of innocent wolves to a human existence." Lyra shook her head. "I can't. My mother made me swear." Her hands stopped moving as tears filled her eyes. Theodore pulled her close. feeling her body shake with silent sobs against his chest. He could feel her heartbeat, rapid and frightened, could sense the weight of responsibility crushing her. "There has to be another way," he signed when she pulled back. "There isn't." Lyra wiped her eyes, composing herself. "You have to leave. Build a life somewhere else. Find a pack that deserves you." "I don't want another pack." "You don't have a choice." She pulled the leather pouch from her pocket, the one with all her mother's tools and teachings. "Take this, Lyra." "No, take it." She pressed it into his hands. "Everything you need to know is inside. My mother's journal, her techniques, her knowledge about wolves like us, wolves who sense the world differently." Her violet eyes locked with his. "Promise me you'll use it. Promise me you'll find a way to thrive, not just survive." Theodore wanted to argue, to refuse, to drag her away from this place by force if necessary. But he could see the resolve in her expression, the same stubborn strength that had made her risk everything to teach him in the first place. "I promise," he signed. "But this isn't over. I'll find a way to free you." Lyra smiled, sad and broken and beautiful. "I know you will." She kissed him then, quick and desperate, tasting of salt and moonlight. Then she was gone, slipping out of his room like a ghost, leaving behind only the scent of lavender and the weight of impossible choices. Theodore stood there for a long moment, the leather pouch heavy in his hands, feeling the vibration of the pack house settling for the night. His family, his prison, his past. Then he shouldered his backpack, tucked the pouch safely inside, and walked out into the night. The moon watched him go, silent and knowing, as Theodore Garrison became a wolf without a pack, carrying nothing but a deaf wolf's determination and a moonbound's desperate hope. Chapter 4: The Rogue's Education. The forest beyond Silvercrest territory was different from anything Theodore had known. Darker, wilder. Every shadow held potential danger, every rustle of leaves could be a threat he couldn't hear coming. He made it 3 days before he nearly died. It happened at dusk on the third night. Theodore had found a small cave to shelter in, was building a fire using techniques he'd learned from books but never practiced. He was so focused on the task that he didn't feel the vibrations until it was almost too late. The rogue wolf hit him from behind, driving him face first into the rocky ground. Theodore rolled instinctively, using the momentum to throw his attacker off. He shifted mid-roll his second time, transforming, still clumsy but faster than the first. His silver-gray wolf emerged in a burst of displaced air, and he spun to face his attacker. The rogue was smaller but scarred, with wild yellow eyes and foam flecking its muzzle. A mad wolf, Theodore realized with horror. One that had lost its connection to humanity and reverted to pure animal instinct. The rogue lunged again. Theodore tried to dodge using the techniques Lyra had taught him, feeling for vibrations, sensing air pressure changes. But the techniques that worked in a controlled library didn't translate to real combat. He was a split second too slow. Teeth tore into his shoulder. Pain exploded through him, white-hot and blinding. Theodore's wolf snarled. He couldn't hear it, but he felt the vibration rumble through his chest. He twisted, snapping at the rogue's throat, but the mad wolf was experienced in ways Theodore wasn't. It released his shoulder and went for his legs, trying to hamstring him. "Feel the earth." Lyra's signs echoed in his memory. "Your paws are connected to every vibration. Trust them." Theodore planted his front paws firmly, forcing himself to stop thinking like a hearing wolf. He spread his awareness through the ground, feeling the mad wolf circle him. There a shift in weight, a gathering of muscle before the strike. When the rogue lunged, Theodore was ready. He pivoted at the last second, using the attacker's momentum against it. His jaws closed around the back of the rogue's neck, not to kill, but to force submission. The mad wolf thrashed for several seconds before going still, defeated. Theodore released it and stepped back, blood dripping from his wounded shoulder. The rogue limped away into the darkness, and Theodore let it go. He'd won, but barely, and only because of Lyra's teachings. He shifted back to human form, his shoulder screaming in agony. The wound was deep, probably infected from the rogue's diseased mouth. Without pack support, without a healer, this kind of injury could kill him. That's when he remembered the leather pouch. Theodore's hands shook as he pulled out the journal from Lyra's mother's collection. It was bound in soft leather, filled with pages of cramped handwriting and detailed sketches. Most wolves couldn't read. Literacy was rare outside of alpha families, but Theodore had spent his isolated childhood devouring every book he could find. The journal was written in Old Tongue, the ancient wolf language that predated modern packs. Theodore's reading was rusty, but he managed to piece together the entries. Day 47 of my exile, the wound on my leg festers. I can smell the rot setting in. If I were in a pack, healers would have herbs and poultices. But I am alone. And alone wolves die from such injuries. But then I remembered I am not truly alone. The moon goddess speaks to those who cannot hear human voices. She showed me the silver moss that grows on north-facing stones. When ground with thistle root and applied as paste, it draws out infection like drawing poison from a snake bite. My mother taught me this. Her mother taught her. We are the moonbound. And the goddess provides for those who listen with more than ears. Theodore looked up from the journal, his heart racing. Silver moss on north-facing stones. He knew he'd seen moss near the cave entrance. He forced himself to stand, ignoring the way his shoulder throbbed. Outside, he searched the rocky face, until he found it. Silvery gray moss clinging to a boulder. He gathered handfuls, then searched for thistle root near the forest edge. Following the journal's instructions, he ground the ingredients together using 2 flat stones, creating a paste that smelled sharp and medicinal. He applied it to his wound, and within minutes, the burning pain began to ease. Theodore sat back against the cave wall, breathing hard, and opened the journal again. Day 63. I have learned something the packs have forgotten. Being deaf is not a curse. It is a different kind of blessing. Hearing wolves are slaves to sound. They jump at every crack of a branch, every howl in the distance. Their attention is constantly pulled in all directions by the chaos of the auditory world. But deaf wolves, we are anchored. We see more because we're not distracted by sound. We feel more because we must. We connect to the earth itself, to vibrations that hearing wolves never notice. The moon goddess made some of us this way for a reason. We are her special children, her secret weapons. In the old times, before the packs grew arrogant, deaf wolves were revered as seers and spiritual leaders. My daughter Lyra must never forget this. She must never let the hearing world convince her that silence is weakness. Theodore felt tears burning his eyes. Lyra's mother had been like him. Alone. Exiled. Fighting to survive in a world that saw her as broken. But she hadn't just survived. She'd thrived. She'd learned secrets that pack wolves had forgotten. She'd become something more. And she'd written it all down for her daughter, for Lyra, and now for Theodore. Over the next 2 weeks, Theodore worked through the journal methodically. Each entry contained lessons that transformed how he understood his own body and abilities. He learned the stillness meditation, a technique where he would sit perfectly motionless for hours, feeling every vibration in the earth. Footsteps of deer 300 yards away, the underground stream running beneath the forest floor, even the subtle tremors of worms moving through soil. He learned the air sense, a practice of becoming so aware of air pressure changes that he could detect movement around corners, behind trees, in complete darkness. The journal explained it as reading the ghost of motion before the motion itself. He learned to hunt without sound, not by stalking but by predicting. He would feel where prey had been, sense the patterns of their movement through disturbed earth, anticipate where they would go next. His success rate grew from 1 in 10 hunts to 8 in 10. But the most valuable lesson came from an entry near the journal's end. Day 127. Today I encountered a pack patrol. They demanded I submit, or face execution, as a rogue. I could see in their eyes that they expected me to cower, to beg for mercy. Instead, I challenged their beta to single combat. He laughed. A deaf wolf challenging a pack warrior? Impossible. I defeated him in 47 seconds. The secret is this. Hearing wolves rely on sound-based communication during combat. They growl to intimidate. They howl to coordinate. They listen for their opponent's breathing, their movement. But I don't need any of that. I feel every muscle shift before the strike happens. I sense weight distribution before the attack lands. I read the story their body tells before they even know they're telling it. Fighting a hearing wolf is like watching someone think out loud. They cannot surprise me because their body announces every intention. The beta submitted. The patrol left me alone. And I understood, perhaps for the first time, that being deaf is not a disability in battle. It's an unfair advantage. Theodore closed the journal and looked at his hands. He'd been thinking about it all wrong. His entire life, he'd tried to compensate for his deafness, to work around it, to pretend it didn't exist. But what if he leaned into it? What if he became the kind of wolf Lyra's mother had been, one who turned perceived weakness into undeniable strength? 3 weeks into his exile, Theodore encountered his first real challenge. He was following a deer trail when he felt a pattern of vibrations that didn't belong to wild animals. Organized, deliberate, military, a patrol. And not just any patrol. He recognized the weight and gait from his time in Silvercrest. They'd come looking for him. Theodore had 2 choices: run or face them. The old Theodore, the one who'd spent his life apologizing for existing, would have run. But he was done running. He found a clearing and waited. The patrol appeared 15 minutes later, 5 wolves, led by a beta warrior named Garrett who'd trained with Theodore years ago. Garrett had always treated him with polite contempt, the kind reserved for defective things you couldn't quite throw away. Garrett's lips moved in speech. One of the other wolves, a younger warrior Theodore recognized, signed roughly, "Rogue." "Alpha Rowan sends his regards. You have one chance: return to Pack Lands and accept permanent exile to the Omega Quarters, or be eliminated as a threat." Theodore signed back, knowing they'd have to translate for Garrett. "Tell my father I'm not a threat. I'm just a deaf wolf trying to survive." Garrett laughed. Theodore could see his shoulders shaking. And the young warrior signed. "Beta says deaf wolves don't survive. Says you'll be dead by winter." "Then why are you here?" The warriors exchanged glances. The young one signed hesitantly. "Elder Mira says you're corrupted, that the Omega Witch taught you dark magic. She wants proof of your death." Lyra. They were calling Lyra a witch, which meant they suspected what she really was, or were getting close to the truth. "There is no dark magic," Theodore signed. "Only knowledge the elders want to keep buried." Garrett apparently didn't appreciate that response, because he shifted. His brown wolf was massive, well-fed, well-trained, backed by pack strength and confidence. The other 4 warriors shifted too, forming a semicircle around Theodore. 5 against 1, impossible odds, unless you knew what they didn't. Theodore shifted into his silver-gray wolf, and this time the transformation was smooth, natural, like slipping into water. He planted his paws firmly, spreading his awareness through the ground. 5 heartbeats, 5 sets of muscles tensing. 5 wolves about to attack in coordinated fashion, something they'd practiced 1,000 times. But coordination requires communication. And communication requires sound. Garrett's mouth opened, probably issuing commands. The other wolves responded, adjusting their positions based on orders Theodore couldn't hear. That was their mistake, because while they were listening to Garrett, Theodore was listening to the earth itself. He felt the wolf on his left gather its haunches for a leap. Felt the one on his right shift its weight forward. Felt Garrett in the center preparing to rush straight ahead while the 2 on the flanks would come in from the sides. A perfect pack tactic, coordinated, lethal. Theodore moved before they did. He lunged left, catching the leaping wolf mid-air, and throwing it into the path of the right side attacker. Both wolves tumbled into a snarling heap. Theodore spun, feeling Garrett's charge through the vibrations, and dropped flat at the last second. Garrett sailed over him, confused, his momentum carrying him past his target. The 2 flank wolves recovered and came at him together. Theodore used the technique from the journal, reading their muscle movements like a language. Duck, dodge, pivot. Each strike they aimed at where he'd been a split second before. To the patrol, it must have looked like magic. Like Theodore could see the future. But he wasn't seeing the future. He was reading the present more clearly than any hearing wolf could. One of the flank wolves overextended. Theodore's jaws closed on its leg, not breaking, just forcing submission. The wolf yelped and limped back, defeated. 4 left. Garrett had recovered now, circling more carefully. Theodore could feel the beta's confusion through the vibrations, hesitation where there had been confidence. Then Garrett did something unexpected. He stopped attacking, shifted back to human form, held up his hands in the universal gesture of peace. The young warrior shifted too and signed. Beta says, "You're not corrupted." Says he's never seen a wolf fight like that. A pause. He wants to know who taught you. Theodore shifted back, his chest heaving. Someone who understood that being different doesn't mean being weak. More discussion among the patrol. Then the young warrior signed again. Beta says, "He'll report you died fighting. But you must leave this territory. Go far enough that no other Silvercrest patrol will find you." A hesitation. He says, "Your father would be proud of what you've become, even if he can't admit it." Theodore felt something twist in his chest. Pride from his father delivered second-hand by a beta, packaged with exile and lies. "Tell Garrett thank you," Theodore signed. "And tell him the Omega isn't a witch. She's just someone trying to survive, like me." The warriors shifted back and departed, leaving Theodore alone in the clearing with his racing heart and the certain knowledge that he'd crossed a line. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was becoming something the Pax had forgotten was possible. Chapter 5. The Council's Summons. 6 weeks of exile had transformed Theodore in ways he'd never imagined possible. He moved through the wilderness like a ghost, his silver-gray wolf form blending with moonlight and shadow. He'd crossed 3 territories, careful to avoid packlands, surviving on what he could hunt and what the journal taught him to forage. He was lean now, hardened by necessity. His senses had sharpened to the point where he could feel a rabbit's heartbeat through the earth from 50 yards away, could sense storm systems building hours before they arrived, could read the history of a place through its vibrations who'd passed through how long ago, whether they'd been friend or threat. But for all his growth, for all his newfound strength, one thing haunted him every night: Lyra. He'd tried to push thoughts of her away, to focus on survival, but every time he used the techniques her mother had written down, every time he felt the moon's pull on his wolf, he thought of violet eyes and the weight of impossible promises. "I'll find a way to free you." The words echoed in his mind like a curse. How? How could he break a magical binding that had existed for generations? How could one deaf rogue wolf challenge an entire pack's power structure? He was contemplating this impossible question when he felt them vibrations that made his wolf bristle with instinct. Not a patrol. Not rogues. Something else entirely. 3 wolves approached from different directions, moving with perfect synchronization. Not aggressive, but deliberate. And around each of their necks, Theodore could see, even from a distance, hung a silver pendant that caught the moonlight. Council wolves. Theodore's heart hammered. The Grand Wolf Council was neutral ground, the governing body that mediated disputes between packs, enforced ancient laws, and maintained the fragile peace between territories. They answered to no alpha, served no single pack. And they were here for him. The 3 wolves shifted simultaneously into human form. 2 males, 1 female, all wearing simple gray robes that marked them as council servants. The woman stepped forward, her hands already moving in fluent sign language. "Theodore Garrison, son of Alpha Rowan, exiled son of Silvercrest." Her signs were formal, practiced. "The council has been watching you." Theodore shifted to human form, acutely aware of his ragged appearance compared to their clean robes. "I haven't broken any council laws." "No," the woman agreed. "In fact, you've done something the council finds fascinating." She gestured to the 2 males. "We've received reports. A deaf wolf who fights like a seer, who moves like he can predict the future, who defeated a 5-wolf patrol without sustaining injury." "I got lucky." "You got skilled," the woman corrected. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her dark eyes missed nothing. "I am Counselor Vera. These are my assistants, Julian and Marcus. We've come with a proposition." Theodore felt suspicion crawl up his spine. The council doesn't make propositions to rogues. The council makes propositions to those who can solve problems. Vera's hands moved with sharp precision. "And we have a problem that requires a very specific skill set. One that, coincidentally, matches your unique abilities." "I'm listening." Vera pulled a rolled parchment from her robe and held it out. Theodore took it carefully, unrolling it to reveal a detailed map. It showed the territories of 7 major packs, all circling a central region marked in red. "The Deadlands," Vera signed, watching his reaction. "For 300 years, this territory has been neutral ground. No pack claims it. No wolves live there permanently. It serves as a buffer zone between rival packs, preventing wars." "I know what the Deadlands are," Theodore signed. Every wolf knew the story's a cursed place where the moon goddess's light didn't reach, where wolves who entered sometimes never came out. Then you know its importance to maintaining peace. Vera's expression hardened. 2 months ago, something changed. Patrols that ventured too close to the Deadlands report strange phenomena. Vibrations in the earth that shouldn't exist. Disruptions in the natural order. And wolves, she paused. Wolves are vanishing. Vanishing how? Entering the Deadlands and never emerging. 7 wolves from 4 different packs. All experienced warriors, all gone without a trace. Julian stepped forward, his signs quick and nervous. The packs are growing suspicious of each other. They think rivals are using the Deadlands to hide ambushes, to launch attacks. We're on the verge of a multi-pack war. What does this have to do with me? The council needs someone to enter the Deadlands and discover what's happening, Vera signed. But here's the problem: hearing wolves can't navigate it. The few who've returned report being driven mad by sounds. Whispers that aren't there. Howls that lead them in circles. Voices of dead packmates calling from the darkness. Understanding crashed over Theodore like a wave. You need a deaf wolf. We need the deaf wolf, Vera corrected. You've proven you can navigate by vibration and air pressure alone. You can't be fooled by auditory hallucinations because you can't hear them. Her signs slowed, becoming more deliberate. The council will pay you for this service. Territory of your own. Recognition from all packs. Protection from rogue hunters. And if I refuse? Then we continue searching for another solution, while wolves keep vanishing and war becomes inevitable. Vera's expression softened slightly. But I don't think you'll refuse, Theodore Garrison, because we both know what you really want. Theodore's hands stilled. What do I want? Information. The third council member Marcus finally spoke through signs, his movements graceful and measured. The council's archives contain records dating back to the first packs, including records about ancient magic, moonbound rituals, ways to break spiritual bindings. Theodore's heart stopped. You know about her. We know about all moonbound, Vera signed. There are 3 left in the world. Your Silvercrest pack has 1. And if you complete this mission, the council will grant you access to every piece of knowledge we possess about breaking moonbound bindings. She leaned forward. We'll help you free her. The offer hung in the air between them like destiny itself. Everything Theodore wanted: information to save Lyra, legitimacy for his existence, a purpose beyond mere survival, all wrapped in one impossible mission. What exactly is in the Deadlands? Theodore signed slowly. That's what you're going to find out, Vera replied. But the prevailing theory among our scholars is that something ancient has awakened, something that predates the packs themselves. Her signs became grave. The Deadlands weren't always cursed. Once, thousands of years ago, they were sacred ground, the place where the moon goddess first blessed the wolves with the gift of transformation. What changed? War, betrayal, power. Marcus's signs were heavy with old sorrow. The details are lost to time. But the result was clear: the sacred ground became cursed ground, and whatever entity was bound there was supposed to sleep forever. Supposed to, Theodore repeated. Nothing sleeps forever, Vera signed. And if it's truly awakening, if it's the source of these disturbances. She didn't finish the thought. She didn't have to. Theodore looked down at the map again, at the red region that seemed to pulse with menace even on parchment. 7 wolves had entered and never returned. 7 experienced warriors who could hear, who had pack support, who weren't facing this alone, and the council wanted to send him, a deaf rogue barely 2 months into exile, into that darkness. It was suicide. It was also his only chance to save Lyra. When do I leave? Theodore signed. The council provided supplies at their base camp, a temporary structure on neutral ground between territories. Food, water, medical supplies, and something that made Theodore's breath catch. A leather-bound book, identical to Lyra's mother's journal. We have 3 moonbound records in our archives, Vera explained, watching Theodore examine the book with reverent care. This one belonged to a healer named Sage who lived 200 years ago. She documented advanced techniques your girlfriend's mother might not have known. She's not my girlfriend. She's your motivation, Vera signed bluntly. Which is what matters. Love makes wolves do impossible things, The council is counting on that. Theodore wanted to argue but couldn't. Vera was right. Without Lyra, he might have accepted the comfortable life of a kept secret in his father's house. Without Lyra, he might never have discovered what he was capable of becoming. He spent 3 days studying the new journal, absorbing techniques that made the previous knowledge seem elementary. Sage had been a master. Her writings detailed how to sense not just vibrations in earth, but vibrations in air, in water, even in moonlight itself. The moon goddess speaks through all mediums, Sage had written in flowing script, but she speaks loudest to those who cannot hear mortal sound. We are her chosen listeners, attuned to frequencies that hearing wolves will never perceive. In places of great power, sacred ground, cursed ground, places where the veil between worlds grows thin, these frequencies become overwhelming. A hearing wolf would be driven mad by the cacophony, but a deaf wolf, properly trained, can navigate by them like a map. On the evening of the 3rd day, Julian approached Theodore as he sat studying by firelight. The young council assistant's signs were hesitant. "Can I ask you something personal?" Theodore nodded. "How do you do it?" Julian's hands moved with genuine curiosity. "Live without hearing? I've tried imagining it, and it terrifies me. The silence, the isolation." Theodore considered the question. A month ago, he would have answered with bitterness, with all the ways deafness had cost him. But now, "It's not silent," he signed slowly. "That's what hearing wolves don't understand. My world isn't empty, it's full of information you can't perceive. Every footstep tells a story. Every shift in air pressure carries meaning. The earth itself speaks in vibrations that hearing wolves are too distracted to notice. But don't you miss it?" Julian persisted. "Music? Voices? Your mother's lullabies?" Theodore felt the familiar ache in his chest. "I miss the idea of those things. But I've learned that what you've never had can't haunt you the way losing something can haunt you." He met Julian's eyes. "I was born into silence. It's not a loss for me, it's just who I am." Julian nodded slowly, something like understanding dawning on his face. "The other council members think this mission is suicide. They think Vera is sending you to die to prove a political point about rogue wolves having value. What do you think?" "I think," Julian signed carefully, "that if anyone can survive the Deadlands, it's a wolf who's already survived being told he shouldn't exist." Theodore was set to enter the Deadlands at dawn. He spent the night reviewing everything he'd learned, preparing himself mentally for what lay ahead. But as the moon rose high and full, he felt a pull not physical but spiritual. Instinctive, he walked away from the camp, following the sensation until he reached a small clearing, and there, in the center, he felt it a vibration unlike anything he'd experienced before. Not from earth or air, but from moonlight itself. Theodore placed his hand on the ground and opened himself to it, the way Sage's journal had instructed. The vision hit him like lightning. He saw the Deadlands not as they were now, but as they'd been thousands of years ago. A sacred grove where the first wolves had come to receive the moon goddess's blessing. He saw ceremonies, rituals, power flowing like water between the mortal and divine. Then he saw the betrayal. A wolf, a powerful alpha, whose name was lost to time, had wanted to claim the sacred power for himself. Had tried to bind the goddess's essence to his bloodline, to make his pack unbeatable. The ritual had failed catastrophically, corrupting the sacred ground and binding something dark in its place. The vision shifted. He saw the present 7 wolves entering the Deadlands, drawn by whispers only they could hear. Saw them encounter something ancient and hungry, something that fed on sound and used it as a weapon. And then he saw himself. Silver-gray fur moving through darkness, immune to the entity's primary weapon. Saw himself approaching something that pulsed with malevolent energy at the Deadlands' heart. Saw himself making a choice that would change everything. The vision released him. And Theodore gasped, his hand jerking away from the earth. His heart raced, his wolf pacing anxiously inside him. The Deadlands weren't just cursed. They were a prison, and whatever was in prison there was using the missing wolves to break free. But the vision had also shown him something else, something the council didn't know or hadn't shared. The entity couldn't be destroyed. It was too old, too powerful, too fundamentally connected to the sacred ground's original purpose. It could only be rebound, and rebinding it would require a sacrifice of immense power. Moonbound power. Theodore's stomach dropped as understanding crystallized. The council knew. They'd always known. They weren't just sending him to investigate, they were sending him to call for Lyra, to force the Silvercrest Pack to send their moonbound into the Deadlands to seal the entity once more. They were using him as bait to expose her true nature. And if she came, if she performed the ritual, the entire wolf world would know what she was. She'd never be able to hide again. Every pack would hunt her, try to claim her, use her power for their own ends, unless Theodore found another way. He stood in the moonlit clearing, Sage's journal heavy in his pack, Lyra's mother's knowledge burning in his memory, and made a decision. He would enter the Deadlands. He would face whatever ancient evil waited there, but he wouldn't call for Lyra. He would find a way to seal it himself, even if it killed him. Chapter 6. Into the Silence. The entrance to the Deadlands was marked by a ring of ancient stones, each carved with warnings in Old Tongue. Theodore ran his fingers over the symbols as dawn broke, translating the words that had been carved centuries ago. Here lies the place where sound betrays, where the goddess's gift became curse. Turn back, children of the moon, for silence is mercy and noise is madness. Comforting. Vera signed from behind him. She and her assistants had escorted Theodore to the border, but would go no further. Last chance to reconsider. You mean last chance for you to feel less guilty about sending me to die? Theodore signed back. Vera's expression didn't change. The council doesn't deal in guilt. We deal in necessity. She pulled out a small device, a compass, but instead of pointing north, its needle spun in lazy circles. This is a resonance tracker. It'll point toward the strongest source of spiritual energy in the Deadlands. Follow it to the center, to the source of the disturbance. Theodore took the compass, watching the needle dance. And when I reach the center, use your judgment. You're intelligent, resourceful, and uniquely equipped for this. Vera's hands moved with something that might have been respect. The council chose well. Theodore Garrison. Don't prove us wrong. Julian stepped forward, pressing a small pouch into Theodore's hand. Inside were 3 smooth stones that glowed faintly with inner light. Moonstones, Julian signed, charged under 3 consecutive full moons. If you need to send a signal, crush one. We'll feel it and know you're alive. He hesitated. Try not to use them unless you absolutely have to. The entity might sense them too. Theodore nodded his thanks and tucked the pouch away. He checked his supplies one final time, 2 journals, the resonance tracker, basic provisions, and a knife made from blessed silver. Not much to face an ancient evil with, but more than he'd had when he started this journey. He shifted into his silver-gray wolf form and crossed the stone threshold. The change was immediate. The ground beneath his paws felt wrong, not solid earth, but something that seemed to pulse and writhe like living tissue. The vibrations he'd learned to read were chaotic here, discordant, like trying to hear 100 conversations at once. But more disturbing was what he didn't feel. The natural rhythm of the forest, the heartbeat of life that usually thrummed through everything, was absent. It was as if he'd stepped into a place that existed outside the normal world, a pocket of existence that had been cut off from the moon goddess's light. Theodore forced himself to breathe, to center himself the way Sage's journal had taught. He planted his paws firmly and spread his awareness, sorting through the chaos for patterns. There, beneath the discord, he could feel something, a rhythm that didn't belong to nature, but to something else. Something ancient and deliberate, like a heartbeat that had been beating for thousands of years. He followed it deeper into the Deadlands. The forest grew darker as Theodore traveled, though the sun had barely risen. Trees here were twisted, their branches reaching toward the sky like clawed hands. No birds sang, not that Theodore would have heard them anyway, but he could feel the absence of their vibrations, the way they avoided this cursed place entirely. 3 hours in, he encountered the first body. It was half buried in the undergrowth, a wolf in mid-shift, frozen between human and animal form, as if death had caught it mid-transformation. The expression on what remained of its face was one of pure terror. Theodore shifted to human form, examining the corpse carefully. No wounds, no signs of violence, just the expression of someone who'd experienced something so horrifying their mind had broken before their body died. He was about to continue when he felt a shift in the air pressure behind him. Not aggressive, but present. Watching. Theodore spun, his hand on the silver knife. Nothing. Just twisted trees and shadows. But he'd felt it clearly. Something was there. He signed into the empty forest, knowing it was pointless but needing to communicate somehow. I know you're there. The air shifted again, and this time Theodore saw it not with his eyes, but with the heightened senses Lyra and Sage had taught him to use. A ripple in reality itself, like heat shimmer but darker. It moved through the trees with fluid grace, circling him. A spirit, or something like one. Theodore remained still, watching the distortion circle closer. The resonance tracker in his pocket spun wildly, its needle pointing directly at the entity. The thing stopped in front of him, and Theodore felt more than saw its attention focus on him, examining, curious. Then, to his shock, a shape began to form in the distortion. A wolf. Translucent, made of shadow and air but distinctly lupine. Its mouth moved, and Theodore knew it was speaking even though he couldn't hear the words. He pulled out a piece of charcoal and a scrap of parchment, writing quickly, "I cannot hear you. Write or show me another way." The shadow wolf tilted its head, seeming to consider this. Then it did something Theodore didn't expect. It shifted to human form. The translucent figure of a woman appeared, beautiful but ethereal, her mouth still moving in speech he couldn't perceive. Theodore shook his head, pointing to his ears, then to the parchment again. The woman's expression changed surprise, then something like understanding. She pointed to the ground between them. Theodore watched as vibrations formed patterns in the dirt, shapes that slowly resolved into words. "You are the deaf one." "Yes," Theodore said aloud, knowing she could probably hear him even if he couldn't hear her. "Good. Sound is poison here. You are safe from the first death." "The first death," Theodore wrote quickly. "What are the others?" The patterns reformed. "I am Keeper, spirit bound to warn. 7 tests for 7 gates. Sound kills hearing wolves at gate 1. What kills deaf wolves waits deeper." Theodore felt his stomach drop. "Are you saying there are 6 more ways to die in here?" "Yes, but you pass first test by nature. Second test requires choice." "What choice?" The spirit woman gestured, and Theodore felt the vibrations shift around him. When his vision cleared, he saw them ghostly images of 7 wolves, the missing warriors the council had spoken of. They stood in a circle around a pit of writhing darkness, their mouths open in silent screams. "They live," the vibrations spelled out. "Trapped between death and madness. Entity feeds on their suffering. You can free them." "How?" "Enter the pit. Sever their connections. But doing so alerts the entity to your presence. It will know you come." Theodore stared at the ghostly images. 7 warriors, suffering because they'd tried to protect the peace between packs. 7 wolves who'd made the mistake of being able to hear. "If I don't free them," he wrote, "you may pass unnoticed. To reach the center. To complete mission. Without entity knowing. Until too late." It was a tactical question. Smart strategy would be to leave them, maintain the element of surprise, maximize his chances of sealing the entity before it could respond. But these wolves had families. Packs that mourned them. And they were suffering, still conscious, still aware, trapped in an endless nightmare. Theodore looked at the spirit woman's translucent face. "If our positions were reversed, what would you choose?" The vibrations in the dirt changed, forming words that felt heavy. "I chose mercy once. I chose to warn instead of kill. The entity punished me by making me watch all who enter. I am bound here forever, keeper of a cursed place, unable to save those I try to help." "But you'd make the same choice again," Theodore wrote, reading the truth in the way she held herself. "Yes." Theodore stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "Then so will I. Show me how to free them." The pit was a wound in reality itself, a tear in the fabric of the world that pulsed with malevolent energy. Theodore could feel it from 20 feet away, a wrongness that made his wolf whine inside him. The spirit woman, who'd identified herself through vibrations as Keeper Nira, guided him to the edge. The 7 trapped wolves were visible now, their forms flickering between solid and transparent, their faces locked in expressions of anguish. "The entity uses sound as chains," Nira's vibrations explained. "Each wolf hears their greatest fear, their deepest shame, spoken in voices of those they love. The psychological torture binds them as surely as iron." "But I can't hear," Theodore wrote. So how do I break the chains? You must enter the pit. Find the resonance point where the entity's power anchors to each wolf. Disrupt it, and when the entity notices, run. Not exactly a comforting plan, but Theodore had committed. He shifted to wolf form, better mobility, better senses, and leaped into the pit. The moment his paws touched the bottom, reality inverted. Suddenly he was standing in his father's office, watching Alpha Rowan sign to a younger version of himself. You should never have been born. Every day you breathe is a reminder of my failure. Theodore's heart clenched, but he recognized it for what it was, an illusion. The entity was trying to hurt him with sound, but it didn't understand. These weren't words he was hearing, they were memories it had pulled from his mind and projected. And Theodore had already made peace with his father's disappointment. He pushed through the illusion, feeling for the resonance point Nira had described. There a pulsing thread of energy connecting each wolf to the pit's center. Theodore followed the closest one to a warrior he recognized from Silvercrest. A beta named Stone who'd always treated him with distant courtesy. Stone's translucent form was locked in a scream, his eyes seeing horrors Theodore couldn't perceive. The resonance thread wrapped around him like rope, pulsing with each heartbeat. Theodore did what Sage's journal had taught him. He placed his paw on the thread and sent his own vibrations through it, not to destroy, but to harmonize and then discord. Finding the thread's frequency and then deliberately hitting the wrong note. The thread shattered like glass. Stone's form solidified, gasping, falling to his knees. His eyes focused on Theodore with shocked recognition before Nira appeared and pulled him upward, out of the pit. 6 more to go. Theodore moved to the next wolf, repeating the process. With each freed warrior, he felt the entity's attention sharpening. It knew something was wrong now, knew something was interfering with its feeding. The illusions intensified. He saw Lyra, her violet eyes empty, signing, "You're not worth the sacrifice. I only pretended to care because I pitied you." He saw his mother on her deathbed, her face twisted with regret at having birthed him. He saw Thorn ascending to Alpha, leading the Silvercrest pack to greatness while everyone forgot the deaf son who'd been exiled. Each illusion cut deep, found old wounds and reopened them. But Theodore kept moving, kept breaking threads, kept freeing wolves. 4 freed. 5. 6. The 7th thread was different, thicker, darker, pulsing with more power than the others. Theodore approached it carefully, feeling something wrong about its resonance. This wasn't a thread holding a wolf captive. It was a thread holding something else. Theodore placed his paw on it anyway. The moment he did, the entire pit exploded with energy. He was thrown backward, slamming into the curved wall of the pit. His vision swam, and when it cleared, he saw it. The entity. Not a spirit like Nira. Not a ghost or illusion. But something vast and terrible. Made of darkness and hunger, and ancient rage. It had no true form, it was more a presence than a being. A consciousness that existed between sound waves, that fed on fear and grew stronger with every terrified scream. And now it was looking directly at Theodore. The last wolf, the one connected to the 7th thread, materialized in front of him. But it wasn't a warrior. It was a young female, barely 20 with familiar gray eyes. Theodore's heart stopped. It was his mother. Luna Garrison. Dead for 18 years. Yet somehow here, somehow trapped in this nightmare. Interesting. Vibrations spelled themselves in the air. Each letter formed from pure malice. A DF wolf. I have not encountered your kind in millennia. You resist my primary weapon. Let her go. Theodore spoke aloud, knowing the entity could hear him. Let all of them go. Why would I do that? They are mine. Their suffering sustains me. Their fear strengthens me. The presence moved closer, and Theodore felt pressure building in his skull. But you are special. You cannot hear my voice, so I cannot break you the way I broke them. Then you have no power over me. Oh, young wolf, I have other weapons. The entity focused on his mother's image, making her sign. You killed me, Theodore. Your existence broke my heart. I died because you were born wrong. Theodore flinched but held his ground. You're not my mother. You're a monster wearing her face. Am I? Or am I the truth she never dared speak? The entity was right about one thing: it couldn't break Theodore with sound. But it could break him with guilt, with shame, with all the wounds a deaf child carries when the world tells him he's incomplete. But Theodore had learned something in his exile. Something Lyra and her mother's journals had taught him. Being different wasn't the same as being broken. He planted his paws firmly and opened himself to the vibrations around him, not the entity's twisted frequencies, but the deeper resonance beneath. The Deadlands had been sacred ground once. That power was still here, buried under centuries of corruption. Theodore reached for it. The entity recoiled. "What are you doing?" "Something you can't understand," Theodore signed to himself, his movements precise and deliberate. "I'm listening to the silence." He found it the original frequency of the sacred ground, pure and untouched by corruption. It hummed at a level so deep that hearing wolves would never perceive it, vibrating through stone and earth and the bones of the world itself. Theodore amplified it. The effect was immediate. The entity screamed not in sound, but in a wave of pressure that made reality ripple. His mother's image dissolved. The seventh thread shattered. All 7 wolves were free. But Theodore had done more than free captives. He'd announced his presence to every dark corner of the Deadlands. The entity knew he was here now. Knew he could hurt it, and it was not pleased. "You will suffer for this, deaf one," the vibrations promised. 6 more gates lie between you and the center, 6 more ways to die. I will be waiting." The entity retreated, pulling back into the shadows. The pit began to collapse, reality reasserting itself. Theodore ran. He burst out of the pit just as it sealed itself, landing hard on solid ground. Nira was there, along with the 7 freed wolves, all conscious now, all staring at him with a mixture of gratitude and terror. Stone shifted to human form and signed clumsily, "You saved us." "Why?" Theodore met his eyes. "Because mercy is its own kind of strength." Then he felt it, a crushing exhaustion as the adrenaline drained away. He'd won the second test, freed the captives, and discovered he could hurt the entity, but he'd also made an enemy of something older and more powerful than any pack, and there were still 5 more tests to pass. Chapter 7. The Mirror of Truth. Stone and the other 6 freed wolves left the Deadlands under Nira's guidance, their bodies weak but alive. Before departing, Stone had signed to Theodore with hands that still trembled. "You're either the bravest wolf I've ever met, or the most foolish. I can't decide which. Does it matter?" Theodore had signed back. "I suppose not. Either way, we owe you our lives." Stone had paused, his expression conflicted. "When you get back, if you get back, I'll tell them what you did here. Tell them the deaf wolf saved us all." Now Theodore stood alone with Nira at the entrance to the 3rd gate, his body aching from the pit's exertion. The resonance tracker spun wildly, pointing deeper into the forest where the trees grew so twisted they formed a canopy of permanent darkness. "Rest," Nira's vibrations urged. "You are exhausted. The 3rd test is not physical but mental. You must be sharp." "What is the 3rd test?" "The Mirror of Truth. It shows you what you most fear to see about yourself." Nira's translucent form flickered with old pain. "I failed this test. I saw myself as I truly was, a coward who chose comfort over duty. The vision broke me." Theodore sat heavily on a fallen log, pulling out dried meat from his provisions. As he ate, he wrote, "But you're here now, guiding me, choosing mercy by warning travelers. Too late. I warn but cannot save. I am bound to watch wolves die, knowing I could have prevented the entity's awakening. If I'd been braver." "How?" Nira's form solidified slightly, as if the memory gave her temporary substance. Her vibrations spelled out a story Theodore hadn't expected. 300 years ago, I was a lunar priestess, keeper of the sacred ground. I knew the Alpha, who betrayed the goddess, knew his plans to steal her power. I could have stopped him, killed him before the ritual, but I loved him, so I did nothing. When the ritual failed and corrupted the sacred ground, the goddess punished us both, him by binding his consciousness to become the entity you fight, Tan me by making me witness every death his hunger causes." Theodore stopped chewing, the implications crashing over him. The entity is a wolf? Was a wolf? Was an alpha. Now is something else. Something that has forgotten its nature and knows only hunger and rage. Can it be reasoned with? No, the wolf is gone. Only the curse remains. It must be resealed, or it will break free and consume everything. Theodore thought of the vision he'd received, the knowledge that resealing required moonbound power. Nira, what if there was another way? What if there is no other way? I have had 300 years to search for one. Her vibrations were sharp with grief. The entity can only be bound by the same power that created it, the moon goddess's direct blessing. Only a moonbound can channel that. Then why send me? Why not demand the council bring a moonbound directly? Because moonbound cannot survive the first 6 tests. They are too connected to sound, to the goddess's voice. The entity would destroy them before they reached the center. Understanding dawned with horrible clarity. The council needs me to clear the path, to weaken the entity's defenses so a moonbound can reach the center safely. Yes, you are the vanguard, the one who makes the sacrifice possible. And if I refuse, then the entity breaks free within a year. Thousands die. The balance between packs collapses into war. Theodore closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices crushing him. Save the world by bringing Lyra here to complete the ritual, exposing her and condemning her to a life of being hunted, or let thousands die to protect one woman he loved. Some choice, he muttered aloud. The 3rd test will show you why you hesitate, Nira warned. It will strip away all your justifications and show you the truth you hide from yourself. Many wolves cannot survive that revelation. What did it show you? That I did not fail because I loved him. I failed because I was too afraid to live with the consequences of doing right. Her form dimmed. Love is the lie we tell ourselves when we make cowardly choices. Theodore stood, shouldering his pack. Then let's see what truth I've been hiding from. The 3rd gate was a structure, the first artificial thing Theodore had seen in the Deadlands. It appeared to be made of volcanic glass, black and reflective, forming an archway that led into a corridor lined with mirrors. Walk the hall, Nira instructed from outside. Face what you see. Reach the end without breaking. That is the test. Theodore shifted to human form. This felt like something he needed to face on 2 legs and entered. The first mirror showed him as he was, ragged, thin, scarred from his weeks of exile. But as he walked, the reflections began to change. The second mirror showed him in Silvercrest Packhouse, wearing fine clothes, sitting at his father's right hand. In this reflection, he could hear his ears were perfect, his wolf strong and respected. Thorn stood behind him, diminished and forgotten. The reflection signed, "This is what you could have been. If the goddess hadn't cursed you." Theodore kept walking. He'd made peace with what he was. The 3rd mirror showed Lyra, but different. No silver collar, no gray omega dress. She wore the robes of a lunar priestess, her violet eyes bright with power, standing before a pack that bowed to her in reverence. The reflection signed, "This is what she could be. Free. Powerful. Worshipped. But you want to trap her. Keep her to yourself. Call it love when it's really possession." Theodore's steps faltered. Was that true? Did he want to free Lyra so she could live her own life? Or so she could live a life with him? The 4th mirror showed both of them, Theodore and Lyra, years older, living in a small cabin far from any pack. Happy, peaceful, isolated. While in the background, shadowy figures of wolves fought and died in a war they could have prevented. The reflection signed, "This is what you really want. To run away together, to let the world burn as long as you're together. You call it love, but it's cowardice. You're just like Nira, choosing personal desire over duty." "No," Theodore said aloud, his hands moving in sharp denial. "That's not, but was it?" The 5th mirror showed his mother. Not the ghost the entity had created, but Luna as she'd been in life, beautiful, fragile, broken. She held a newborn baby, and the look on her face was pure despair. The reflection signed with her hands, "I prayed to the moon goddess for a child. For 17 years I prayed. And when she finally answered, she gave me you. A broken thing that killed my spirit before my body finally followed. She's not real," Theodore told himself. "None of this is real." But the reflection continued. "I tried to love you. Tried to see past the defect. But every time I looked at you, I saw my failure. Every time you needed me, I felt the weight of a blessing that became a curse. You killed me, Theodore, not with your hands, but with your existence." Theodore's legs trembled. These were the words he'd carried his entire life. The fear beneath every breath. That his mother had died because of him. That his existence had been too heavy a burden for her heart. I didn't ask to be born. He signed to the mirror, his hands shaking. I didn't ask for any of this. But you were born, the vibrations from the mirror spelled out. And now you use your pain as an excuse. I suffered, so I deserve happiness. I was rejected, so I can be selfish. You hide your cowardice behind your disability. I'm not a coward. Then prove it. The sixth mirror was the largest, taking up the entire wall at the corridor's end. It showed Theodore as he was now, standing in this hall, but beside him stood another figure, a shadow version of himself, its eyes empty and cold. The real reflection signed, "This is who you are. A wolf who survived by being invisible, by not making waves, by accepting less so others don't have to acknowledge you exist." The shadow version signed, "This is who you're becoming. Someone who pretends his choices are about love when they're really about fear. You don't want to bring Lyra here because you're afraid she'll complete the ritual and won't need you anymore. Afraid she'll realize you're not worth the sacrifice she's made. That's not true, isn't it? You've built your entire identity around being the underdog. The rejected one. The wolf no one believes in. If Lyra is free and powerful, what does that make you? Just another wolf who didn't earn his place." Theodore stared at the two reflections, the truth of what he was, and the truth of what he feared becoming. And in that moment, the Hall of Mirrors did what it was designed to do. It stripped away every justification, every noble rationalization, every lie he'd told himself. The brutal truth settled over him like a weight. He was afraid. Not for Lyra's safety, though that was real too, but for himself. Afraid that if she was free, she wouldn't need him. Afraid that the only reason she cared was because they were both broken, both trapped, both desperate for connection. Afraid that without his pain to define him, he was nothing special at all. The realization should have broken him. That was the test's purpose, to shatter wolves with the truth of their own weakness. But something unexpected happened instead. Theodore laughed. It was a short, bitter sound, but genuine. Because here in this hall of brutal honesty, he'd discovered something the test hadn't anticipated. He was afraid. He was selfish. He was using his pain as an excuse. And knowing that changed everything. "You're right," he signed to the mirrors, to the reflections of his fears and failures. "I am afraid. I am selfish. I do want her to need me because I'm terrified of being alone again." The mirrors flickered, confused. This wasn't how wolves usually responded. "But here's what you don't understand," Theodore continued, his signs becoming stronger, more certain. "Knowing I'm afraid doesn't mean I have to let fear win. Knowing I'm selfish doesn't mean I have to make selfish choices." He stepped closer to the final mirror, facing his shadow self directly. "I'm not going to be brave because I'm fearless. I'm going to be brave because I'm terrified, and I'm doing it anyway." His hands moved with absolute conviction. "And when I bring Lyra here, because I will bring her here, if there's no other way, it won't be because I'm selfless and noble. It'll be because I love her enough to risk losing her if it means she survives." The shadow self recoiled, and Theodore felt the shift in the corridor's energy. Love isn't about keeping people. It's about setting them free, even when it destroys you. He pressed his hand against the mirror, feeling its surface crack beneath his palm. "My mother died of a broken heart because she couldn't accept what I was. I won't do the same to Lyra, by refusing to accept what she needs to be." The mirror shattered, not violently, but like ice melting the glass, simply dissolved into light. The entire hall of mirrors collapsed around him, the test recognizing what Theodore had just demonstrated. Truth didn't have to break you if you stopped fighting it. Theodore found himself standing in a clearing on the other side of the third gate, breathing hard, his face wet with tears he hadn't realized he'd shed. Nira appeared beside him, her translucent form more solid than he'd seen it before. Her vibrations formed words that sounded almost like pride. "You passed." Few wolves survive seeing themselves that clearly. "It almost killed me," Theodore admitted. "Truth often does. But you did something I never could. You looked at your worst self and chose to be better anyway." Theodore wiped his face and pulled out the resonance tracker. The needle pointed forward, deeper into the Deadlands. 3 tests down, 4 to go. And somewhere at the center, the entity waited, the wolf, who'd become a monster because he'd chosen power over principle. Theodore wouldn't make the same mistake, even if it cost him everything. That night, while camped under twisted trees that blocked out the moon, Theodore pulled out one of the moonstones Julian had given him. The small crystal glowed softly in his palm, charged with 3 full moons' worth of light. He told himself he would find another way, that he'd seal the entity without dragging Lyra into this nightmare. But the Hall of Mirrors had shown him the truth. That was fear talking, not strategy. If there was no other way and Nira had spent 3 centuries confirming there wasn't, then keeping Lyra in the dark wasn't protecting her. It was protecting himself from the guilt of asking her to make an impossible sacrifice. She deserved to make her own choice. Theodore crushed the moonstone. The light burst outward. A signal that would reach the council. That would tell them he'd survived 3 tests and was proceeding. But more than that, it was a message he'd written in old tongue on a piece of parchment and wrapped around the stone. The entity can only be sealed by moonbound power. I can clear the path but cannot complete the mission alone. Tell the Silvercrest Pack to send their moonbound. Tell Lyra I'm sorry. Tell her she has a choice, she always had a choice. But tell her the truth about what's at stake. Tell her I love her enough to let her decide. The light faded. The message was sent, and Theodore settled in to wait for dawn, knowing that when Lyra learned the truth, she would make her own impossible choice. He just hoped selfishly, desperately, that somewhere in that choice, there would still be room for a deaf wolf who'd learned that love meant letting go. Chapter 8. The Council's Game. Theodore reached the 4th gate 2 days after sending the signal. 2 days of fighting through terrain that actively tried to kill him, trees that moved when he wasn't looking, ground that opened into pits of shadow, air that thickened until breathing felt like drowning. But he'd survived. And with each obstacle overcome, he felt himself changing. Not just stronger, but more attuned to the Deadland's twisted frequencies. He was learning to read its patterns, to anticipate its attacks. The entity was teaching him, whether it meant to or not. The 4th gate was a stone archway covered in old tongue inscriptions. Nira materialized beside him, her translucent form flickering with what looked like nervousness. This test is different, she signed through vibrations. Not a challenge of strength or morality, but of knowledge. What kind of knowledge? The entity will offer you a bargain. It will show you truths others have hidden. Secrets that change everything. Her form dimmed with old shame. Most wolves take the bargain. The knowledge corrupts them before they reach the center. Did you take it? I did not face this test. It was added after my time near as vibrations carried confusion. The entity learns. Adapts. This gate did not exist when I was alive. That sent a chill through Theodore. An ancient evil that could evolve, create new challenges, learn from those who'd faced it before. No wonder the council struggled to contain it. What happens if I refuse the bargain? I do not know. No one has refused. Theodore stepped through the archway. The entity's offer. The space beyond the gate wasn't a forest or corridor. It was a void, absolute darkness except for a single point of light ahead. Theodore walked toward it, feeling the entity's presence pressing against his mind like a physical weight. When he reached the light, he found himself standing in a room he recognized. The council's archive chamber. Shelves stretched in all directions, filled with ancient texts and scrolls. But this wasn't real. Couldn't be real. A projection, the entity's vibrations confirmed, spelling themselves in the air around him, built from your memories and desires. You want to know how to save your mate without sacrifice? I can show you. At what cost? Simply listen, learn, understand the truth about those who sent you here. A figure materialized, Counselor Vera, perfect in every detail. Her hands moved in sign language, but Theodore knew these weren't her real words. The entity was speaking through her image. The council lied to you, Theodore Garrison, the false Vera signed. Let me show you what they didn't want you to know. The scene shifted. Theodore found himself watching a council meeting from 2 months earlier, before wolves started vanishing, before he was even exiled from Silvercrest. He saw Vera speaking to other council members, her hands moving urgently. The entity is weakening its prison. We have perhaps a year before it breaks free entirely. An older counselor signed back. Then we perform the ritual, find a moonbound and seal it properly. It's not that simple, Vera's image replied. To reseal the entity requires not just moonbound power, but a sacrifice. The moonbound must willingly give up their connection to the moon goddess, become human permanently. No pack will allow their moonbound to make that sacrifice. Then we force them. We can't. The ritual only works if given freely. Coercion breaks the magic. Vera's expression had been calculating. But we can create circumstances where a moonbound chooses to sacrifice themselves. Theodore's stomach dropped as understanding dawned. The scene shifted again. He watched Vera meeting with Elder Mira from Silvercrest pack, the same elder who'd declared Theodore incomplete at birth. Your pack has a moonbound, Vera signed to Mira. Disguised as an Omega. We need her. You can't have her, Mira signed back sharply. She's bound to us. Without her rituals, our pack loses its power. What if I told you the entity will break free within a year? That when it does, it will consume every pack in its path, starting with those closest to the Deadlands. Vera leaned forward. Silvercrest is in the blast radius. Mira's hands had trembled. Then bring warriors. Kill it. It can't be killed. Only sealed. And sealing requires, I won't sacrifice our moonbound. Then let me propose an alternative. Vera's smile had been cold. Your pack has another problem. The deaf son. An embarrassment to your alpha. A political liability. Theodore? Mira's signs showed confusion. What does he have to do with this? Everything. Vera pulled out a map of the Deadlands. A deaf wolf is immune to the entity's primary weapon sound. He could navigate the Deadlands, reach the center, weaken the entity's defenses. But he'd need motivation. Theodore watched as Vera and Mira conspired, watched as they crafted the plan that had led him here, the carefully orchestrated exile, the chance encounter with Lyra in the library. Even Thorne's confrontation had been manipulated. Elder Mira had told Thorne where to find them, knowing it would force Theodore's first shift and subsequent expulsion. Once exiled, he's desperate, Vera signed. Lost, alone. Then we approach with an offer, help us in the Deadlands, and we'll give him information about breaking moonbound bindings. He'll never succeed. Mira signed. He's weak. Untrained. He doesn't need to succeed. Vera's signs were brutal in their honesty. He just needs to reach the center, damage the entity enough that when we send the moonbound after him, she can complete the ritual. He's the vanguard, the disposable piece. And the girl will come? Of course she will. They've bonded. She'll come to save him, never realizing she's walking into a trap. Once she sees the entity up close, sees the threat it poses, she'll make the sacrifice. Love makes people stupid and predictable. Mira had nodded slowly. And Silvercrest gets rid of two problems at once. The deaf embarrassment dies heroically in the Deadlands. The moonbound sacrifices herself to save the world. Your alpha gets to play the tragic father who lost his son in service to the greater good. Everyone wins. Except them, Mira signed. They were never supposed to matter. Vera replied. The projection froze, leaving Theodore standing in the false archive, his heart racing with fury and betrayal. Now you see, the entity's vibrations spelled out. They used you, both of you. Your exile was orchestrated, your encounter with the Omega was planned. Even your love was manufactured to serve their purposes. Theodore's hands shook as he processed what he'd seen. Every moment of hope, every scrap of connection he'd built with Lyra, all of it contaminated by manipulation. They made you fall in love so they could weaponize it, the entity continued. Made her care for you so she would follow you to death. You are not a hero. You are a tool. Why show me this? Theodore demanded aloud. Because I offer you an alternative. The void shifted, showing a new image. Theodore and Lyra, far from any pack, living freely without collar or exile. I can break her moonbound binding. I possess knowledge even the council has forgotten. Free her from the magic that chains her to Silvercrest. Free yourself from the destiny they have written for you. In exchange for what? Leave. Walk away. Let me rise. I will destroy the packs that betrayed you both, the council that used you, the Alpha who rejected you. They deserve punishment, and I will deliver it. The offer hung in the void like poison wrapped in justice. Theodore could see it so clearly, taking Lyra's hand and running while the entity consumed everyone who'd hurt them. Bira's calculating smile wiped away. Mira's cruel judgment silenced. His father's disappointment ended permanently. Revenge and freedom, packaged together. They made you a weapon pointed at your beloved, the entity whispered through vibrations. I offer to turn you into a weapon pointed at your enemies. Which sounds more just? Theodore stood in the darkness, feeling the weight of the decision. Everything the entity showed him made sense. The council had manipulated him from the start. His love for Lyra had been engineered as a control mechanism. He was a disposable pawn in a game played by wolves who saw him as nothing more than a useful defect. They deserved what the entity would do to them. But then Theodore remembered something Lyra had signed to him in the library, during one of their first lessons. The difference between wisdom and cleverness is knowing when you're being manipulated. He looked at the projection of himself and Lyra living freely, and for the first time he really examined it. Her smile was empty. His eyes were hollow. They stood together but somehow alone, their happiness a painted mask over something rotten underneath. This wasn't freedom. It was another kind of prison. You're lying. Theodore signed to the void. I showed you truth. You showed me truth mixed with lies. A half-truth is worse than a lie because it's harder to recognize. Theodore's hands moved with growing certainty. Yes, the council manipulated me. But my love for Lyra? That's mine. They didn't manufacture it, they just tried to use it. Semantics. No, it's everything. Theodore stepped back from the projection. You said you can break moonbound bindings, but Nira told me you were once an alpha who tried to steal the moon goddess's power. You failed. You were cursed. So how could you possibly know how to break bindings the goddess created? The void rippled with anger. You can't, Theodore continued, signing to the darkness itself. You're offering me something you can't deliver, hoping I'll run away and abandon the mission. Because you're afraid. I fear nothing. You fear me. Theodore felt the truth of it resonating through the void. Not because I'm strong, but because I'm immune to your primary weapon. Every test you've thrown at me, I've passed. And each test I pass makes you weaker. Arrogant child. I'm not arrogant. I'm just paying attention. Theodore pulled out Sage's journal, holding it up even though the entity had no eyes to see it with. You've been sealed for 300 years, getting weaker, forgetting what you were. But I've spent weeks studying how ancient magic works. And I know something you've forgotten. What? Curses work both ways. The goddess bound you here, but that binding also protects you. If you break free, you lose that protection. You'll be vulnerable to any wolf with moonbound knowledge. Theodore's signs were sharp, confident. You don't want to escape. You want me to leave so you can stay safely imprisoned, feeding on occasional victims who wander in, never having to face actual judgment. The void exploded with rage. Reality fractured, and Theodore felt pressure crushing him from all sides. The entity's fury was a physical force, trying to pulverize him for seeing through its deception. But Theodore had learned something in the Hall of Mirrors. Truth was a weapon sharper than any claw. I refuse your bargain, he signed as the void collapsed. Not because I'm noble or brave, but because I'd rather die trying to do right than live with the consequences of doing wrong. The fourth gate shattered like glass. Theodore stumbled out of the void, gasping, finding himself back in the twisted forest. Nira rushed to his side, her translucent form flickering with shock. You passed. No one has ever passed the fourth gate. The entity showed me things. Theodore pulled himself to his feet, his body aching but his mind clear. About the council's manipulation. Was any of it true? Nira's vibrations formed words slowly, heavily. Some. The council did engineer your circumstances. They needed a deaf wolf, and created the conditions to force you into exile. Did they know about Lyra and me, plan our connection? No. Nira's form solidified with certainty. That was pure chance. They knew a moonbound was in Silvercrest, but not her identity. Your meeting. Your bond that was your own doing. The entity lied when it said your love was manufactured. Theodore felt something loosen in his chest. His feelings for Lyra were real. Messy and complicated, and born from trauma and circumstance, but real. What about the sacrifice? Does the moonbound really have to give up their connection to the goddess? Yes. Nira's vibrations carried ancient grief. The ritual requires a permanent sacrifice. The moonbound becomes human, loses their wolf entirely, lives a mortal lifespan, instead of the extended one goddess blessed wolves enjoy. So the council had been truthful about that part at least. To seal the entity, Lyra would have to give up everything that made her special, everything her mother had passed down, everything she was. Is there truly no other way? Theodore asked, desperately. No alternative that lets her keep her power? Lyra was silent for a long moment. Then, there is one. But it has never been attempted. Theodore's heart raced. Tell me, if the entity could be truly destroyed, not sealed, but unmade, then no sacrifice would be needed. But to destroy it requires unmaking the original curse. How? The Alpha, who became the entity before he was a monster. He was a wolf who loved power more than anything. His true name was erased from history to prevent anyone from summoning or binding him through it. Lyra's form flickered. But I knew him. I loved him. I remember. Understanding crashed through Theodore. If someone spoke his true name at the center, during the moment of sealing, the curse could be broken. The Alpha's consciousness could be separated from the entity's power. He could be freed to pass on. And the power itself could be returned to the goddess. Lyra's vibrations trembled. But speaking the name would require someone who could withstand the entity's full wrath long enough to complete the phrase. It would take minutes, and the entity would do everything to stop them. Could a moonbound do it? No. The entity's rage would overwhelm them. They would be connected to too much sound, goddess voice, spiritual frequencies. The attack would be multidimensional, but a deaf wolf would only experience the physical attacks. Still deadly, but survivable. Maybe. Lyra looked at him with something like hope. You could speak the name. I could teach it to you. And if a moonbound was present to channel the freed power back to the goddess, then Lyra wouldn't have to sacrifice herself. Theodore finished. She'd just need to complete the ritual while I hold the entity's attention. Yes. But Theodore, the entity would try to kill you, truly kill you, not capture or torture but obliterate. You would be fighting for your life while speaking a 7-phrase invocation in Old Tongue. Teach me the name. Theodore signed without hesitation. Teach me everything. Lyra's translucent face showed emotions that had been buried for 3 centuries. Hope, fear, desperate determination. His name was Mordecai Nightshade, Alpha of the first Darkwood pack. The wolf who loved me. The wolf. I failed to stop. She began teaching him the invocation, and Theodore memorized every sign, every syllable, every nuance. It was a prayer and a curse, a naming and an unmaking. Spoken correctly, it would separate the wolf's soul from the curse's power. Spoken incorrectly, it would strengthen the entity and doom them all. As dawn broke over the twisted forest, Theodore finished learning the invocation. 3 gates remained between him and the center. 3 more tests before he could face the entity. But now he had something he hadn't before. A 3rd option. Not the council's plan of sacrifice. Not the entity's offer of revenge. But a desperate gamble that might save everyone, including the wolf he loved. Chapter 9. The Final Trials. The 3 remaining gates stood in sequence, each visible from the previous one, a gauntlet designed to break wolves through exhaustion as much as challenge. The entity knew Theodore was coming now, knew he'd refused the bargain, and it was done playing subtle games. The 5th gate was a wall of black flame that stretched impossibly high, blocking the path forward. No archway, no passage. Just fire that burned without heat but promised something worse. Spirit fire, Lyra's vibrations explained. It burns doubt, regret, hesitation. Anything in your heart that makes you question your purpose. How do I pass through? You must have absolute conviction. No uncertainty. No second guessing. The fire will consume any part of you that isn't committed to your goal. Theodore stared at the flames. After everything he'd learned, the council's manipulation, the entity's lies, the impossible task ahead, how could he have absolute conviction? Doubt was the only rational response to his situation. What if I can't? He signed. Then the fire consumes you. Your body survives, but your will breaks. You become like the entity, a hollow thing, driven only by hunger. Theodore took a breath and examined his own heart. Yes. He had doubts. About whether he could survive speaking the invocation. About whether Lyra would even come. About whether this desperate plan would work or just get them both killed. But beneath all those doubts was something solid and unshakable. He was going to try. Not because he was certain of success, but because trying was the only choice he could live with. Theodore walked into the spirit fire. It hit him like ice and lightning simultaneously. Every doubt flared to life. All his fears about failing. About not being enough. About leading Lyra to her death. The fire found them and began to burn. But Theodore didn't fight it. He let the fire consume his doubts while holding tight to his conviction. I will do this. I will speak the name. I will give Lyra a choice that doesn't end in sacrifice. The doubt burned away like dead wood, leaving only the core truth behind. Theodore emerged on the other side of the flames, gasping but whole, changed, lighter, certain in a way he'd never been before. The sixth gate was the opposite, a tunnel of ice so cold it burned in reverse, freezing everything it touched. Theodore could feel it through the vibrations, a stillness that threatened to stop his heart, his blood, his very thoughts. The ice freezes emotion, Nira warned. Love, anger, hope, fear, it takes all of it. You must pass through without losing your humanity. What happens if I do? You become efficient. Logical. A perfect weapon. But weapons don't love. Don't hope. Don't care who they hurt. Theodore understood. The entity wanted to turn him into what the council had tried to make him, a tool without feelings, easier to manipulate and control. He shifted to wolf form and ran into the ice tunnel. The cold hit immediately, sinking through fur and skin into his very bones. He felt his emotions beginning to crystallize and shatter. Fear froze and fell away. Anger cooled to nothing. Even his love for Lyra started to feel distant, unimportant, a distraction from the mission. Theodore forced himself to remember. Not just Lyra's face, but the feeling of her hand signing to him in the library. The warmth of her belief when she'd said, "You're not broken, you're different." The weight of her hope when she'd pressed her mother's journal into his hands. The ice tried to take the memories, but Theodore held them close, breathing warmth into each one through sheer stubbornness. He remembered joy and pain, fear and hope, all the messy emotions that made him a wolf and not a weapon. He burst out of the tunnel, his wolf form steaming in the warmer air, his emotions intact and burning brighter for having nearly lost them. 2 gates down. 1 to go. The 7th gate stood alone at the edge of a massive crater. Beyond it, Theodore could see the center of the Deadlands, a swirling vortex of dark energy where the entity waited. This gate was different from the others. It had no physical form, no obvious challenge. It was simply a threshold marked by 2 standing stones. And between them stood a figure Theodore recognized instantly. Lyra. She stood in the gateway, her violet eyes bright, her hands already moving in sign language. Theodore. Thank the goddess. I received your message. I came as fast as I could. Theodore's heart leaped before his mind caught up. Nira had said the 7th test was truth, which meant, "You're not real," he signed. The false Lyra's expression flickered with hurt. What? Theodore, it's me. I'm here to help you. The real Lyra couldn't have gotten here this fast. My message was sent 2 days ago. The Deadlands are weeks from Silvercrest territory. Theodore forced himself to sign calmly despite the way his heart ached at seeing her, even a false version. You're another test. I used the council's transportation. False Lyra signed desperately. They have ways to travel quickly. Theodore, please, we don't have much time. The entity is... What was the first thing you ever signed to me? Theodore interrupted. In the library. The very first words. False Lyra's hands hesitated. I said I was sorry for disturbing you. Wrong. Theodore felt his chest tighten. You signed. I didn't know anyone was here. Small difference. But the real Lyra would remember. The false image flickered, and for a moment, Theodore saw the truth beneath the entity, wearing her face like a mask. Trying one last time to make him hesitate. Clever. The entity's vibrations spelled out as false Lyra dissolved. But this changes nothing. The real one is coming. I can feel her approaching the Deadlands border. She received your message, and she will come. I know. Then, you know I win either way. If she comes, I have 2 targets instead of 1. If she doesn't, you face me alone and fail. Maybe, Theodore signed to the empty air. Or maybe you're so afraid of what we can do together that you're trying to make me send her away. The entity didn't respond, but Theodore felt its rage through the vibrations in the ground, frustrated, fearful rage. Good. He stepped through the 7th gate. The crater's center was a wound in reality itself, a place where the fabric of the world had been torn and never healed. At its heart, suspended in chains of solidified darkness, was a figure that might have once been a wolf but had become something else entirely. The entity. Mordecai Nightshade, the alpha who'd tried to steal a goddess's power. Up close, Theodore could see traces of what he'd been: the proud line of a jaw, the shape of shoulders built for leadership. But those traces were corrupted, twisted into something monstrous. The figure's eyes were empty voids that somehow still managed to convey hatred. You came. The entity's vibrations shook the crater. The deaf wolf who thinks he can unmake me. I don't think. I know. Theodore pulled out the journals, holding them up. Your name is Mordecai Nightshade. You were alpha of the Darkwood Pack. You loved a priestess named Nira, and betrayed her trust. You tried to bind the moon goddess's power to yourself and failed. The entity recoiled, and Theodore felt satisfaction course through him. Speaking the name had power. Even without the full invocation, names are meaningless. I am beyond names now. Beyond individual identity. I am hunger and darkness, and ancient rage. No. Theodore signed. You're a scared wolf who made a mistake and has been too proud to accept the consequences for 300 years. The entity's roar was soundless but felt through every fiber of Theodore's being. The chains holding its form began to crack. I will show you consequences. The attack came from all directions: physical, spiritual, psychological. Shadow forms materialized around Theodore, each one a nightmare given shape. They couldn't make sounds he could hear, but they could tear flesh, break bones, kill through sheer brutality. Theodore shifted to wolf form and fought, but he was one against dozens, and his body was already exhausted from passing 7 gates. A shadow claw raked his side, teeth sank into his leg. He was being overwhelmed. Then he felt it, a shift in the air pressure at the crater's edge. A familiar vibration that made his wolf howl with joy and terror. Lyra had arrived. She stood at the crater's edge in her gray omega dress, the silver collar gone from her neck, her violet eyes taking in the scene below. Behind her stood the council wolves: Vera, Julian, Marcus, but Lyra's attention was focused entirely on Theodore. He could see her making calculations, see the moment she understood what he was trying to do. Her hands moved in sign language, visible even from this distance. You're trying to destroy it, not seal it. Theodore managed to nod even as he fought off 2 shadow forms. The invocation, Lyra signed. Nira taught you. Another nod. A shadow claw caught him across the ribs, and he felt bones crack. Lyra turned to face Counselor Vera, her hands moving sharply. Theodore couldn't see Vera's response, but he saw Lyra's face harden with determination. Then she was moving, sliding down the crater's slope, running toward him with a speed that suggested her wolf was closer to the surface than most Omegas ever got. No. The entity's rage shook the ground. She cannot interfere. More shadow forms materialized, these ones targeting Lyra. But she was fast, graceful, dodging with the precision of someone who'd spent years surviving by being invisible. She reached Theodore's side, her hands immediately glowing with soft light as she touched his broken ribs. I can stabilize you, she signed with one hand while healing with the other. Long enough to speak the invocation. But you'll have to hold its attention while I prepare the channel for the freed power. You were supposed to have a choice, Theodore signed desperately. Not be forced into this. This is my choice, you stubborn wolf. Lyra's violet eyes blazed with determination. You think I came here because the council demanded it? I came because you're attempting something impossible and stupid and brave, and I'll be damned if I let you do it alone. Despite everything, the pain, the danger, the shadow forms closing in. Theodore felt something inside him soar. She'd chosen this. Chosen him. Chosen to fight instead of sacrifice. I love you, he signed with his free hand. Tell me again when we survive this, Lyra signed back. Then her expression turned serious. The invocation has 7 phrases. You'll need to speak one every 30 seconds while the entity tries to kill you. Can you do it? Theodore looked at the chains cracking around Mordecai Nightshade's corrupted form, at the shadow forms circling like predators, at the malevolent intelligence that had spent 3 centuries feeding on fear. Yes, he signed. Then let's free him, Lyra said. Let's end this curse. She moved to the center of the crater, her hands beginning to weave patterns in the air that glowed with moonlight. Theodore could feel her power building, preparing to channel whatever was unleashed when the invocation broke the curse. The entity realized what they were attempting and went insane with fury. Every shadow form attacked at once, a tide of darkness meant to drown them both. Theodore planted his paws, centered himself using every technique Sage and Lyra's mother had taught him, and began to speak the invocation aloud, his voice rusty from disuse but clear in the deadly silence of the Deadlands. Mordecai Nightshade, Alpha of Darkwood, who bound his soul to darkness. The entity screamed. The shadow forms intensified their assault. Theodore felt teeth and claws tearing at him, but Lyra's healing light kept him conscious, kept him standing. 30 seconds. He needed to survive 30 seconds until the next phrase. He'd never wanted anything more than to survive the next 30 seconds. Who loved and betrayed in equal measure. Second phrase. Theodore could barely stand now. Blood matted his silver-gray fur, but Lyra's power flowed into him, not healing but sustaining, keeping his heart beating and his lungs breathing. The entity's form was changing, the chains beginning to dissolve. Behind the monster, Theodore could see glimpses of the wolf it had been, young, proud, desperate for glory, who reached for power beyond mortal claiming. Third phrase. The shadow forms were tearing him apart. But something was happening to them too. They were becoming less solid, more transparent, as if the invocation was unraveling the magic that gave them form. Who paid the price of his ambition in centuries of darkness. Fourth phrase. Theodore's vision was starting to blur. He could feel his body wanting to give up, to stop fighting, to let go. But Lyra was behind him, chanting in old tongue, her voice joining his in a harmony that transcended sound. They were doing it. Actually doing it. Who forgot his name but never forgot his hunger. Fifth phrase. The entity's form was splitting apart now, the curse separating from the consciousness beneath. Theodore could see Mordecai Nightshade's true face emerging, not monstrous, but tired, so impossibly tired, who earned his freedom through another's courage. Sixth phrase. Theodore collapsed to the ground, his wolf form failing. He shifted back to human, his body broken but his voice still working. Behind him, he felt Lyra's power reaching its crescendo, ready to catch the freed magic and return it to the moon goddess. One phrase left, just one, but the entity, what remained of it, made a final desperate attack. Not at Theodore but at Lyra. If she died before completing the channel, the freed power would explode uncontrolled, killing them all. Theodore saw it coming. Felt the vibration of the killing strike aimed at her back. He threw himself between them. The shadow claw pierced his chest, driving through his heart. Pain beyond description. Darkness closing in from all sides, but his mouth was still working. His voice still carried. Who is free now? Who is forgiven? Who can finally rest? The seventh phrase. The entity shattered. Mordecai Nightshade's consciousness separated from the curse's power in a blinding flash. Theodore saw his face, truly saw it for just a moment. The Alpha looked at him with something like gratitude, like recognition of one outcast to another, before his spirit dissolved into light and was gone. The dark power exploded outward, and Lyra's channel caught it, redirected it, sent it flowing back to the moon goddess in a column of silver light that pierced the sky. The Deadlands shuddered, changed. The twisted trees began to straighten. The poisoned ground started to heal. 300 years of corruption burning away in seconds. Theodore lay on his back, the shadow claw still embedded in his chest, and watched the moon become visible through clouds that were finally breaking apart. Lyra's face appeared above him, her violet eyes wide with horror and grief. Her hands moved frantically in healing light, but they both knew it was too late. The wound was too severe. His heart had stopped. No. She signed with shaking hands. No, you don't get to die now. Not after everything. Not after. Did it work? Theodore's signs were weak, fading. Are you still moonbound? Lyra's tears fell on his face. Yes. The ritual succeeded. I kept my power. You destroyed the entity instead of sealing it. Her hands trembled. But what good is it if you're worth it? Theodore signed. His vision was dimming now, the edges going dark. You're free. Choice. That's what matters. Theodore, please. But he was already gone, his hands falling still, his gray eyes staring at a moon he couldn't see but had always felt. Lyra threw her head back and screamed a sound Theodore would never hear. A grief that shook the newly healed ground. And in the silence that followed, the moon goddess who'd been watching this deaf wolf since the moment of his birth made a choice of her own. Chapter 10. The Goddess's Gift. The moon goddess descended in a column of silver light that made the newly healed deadlands look dim by comparison. She had no fixed form. Sometimes she appeared as a massive white wolf. Sometimes as a woman with eyes like stars. Sometimes as pure moonlight given consciousness. But her presence was undeniable. A power that made even Counselor Vera fall to her knees at the crater's edge. Lyra looked up from Theodore's body, her violet eyes red from crying, her hands still glowing uselessly with healing power that couldn't restart a heart that had given everything. The goddess's voice didn't speak in sound but in vibrations that every wolf present could feel through their very bones. Even Theodore, lying dead, felt the resonance of her words. You called to me through your ritual, moonbound. You returned my stolen power. You healed what was broken. Please. Lyra signed desperately, her hands shaking. Please, if you're here. If you can do anything, he doesn't deserve this. He saved everyone. He gave everything. I know what he gave. The goddess's form shifted to that of a wolf, massive and ancient, her fur, the color of moonlight on water. I have watched this one since his first breath. Watched him be called broken. Watched him be rejected. Watched him survive what would have destroyed lesser wolves. The goddess approached Theodore's body, and where her paws touched the ground, silver flowers bloomed, the same flowers that had once covered these lands before the curse took root. He was never broken. He was exactly what I made him to be. A wolf who could hear my voice when others could not. A wolf who understood silence as sacred rather than empty. Then save him. Lyra's signs were sharp with grief and anger. If you value him so much, if he was part of your plan all along, don't let him die like this. Death is not the end, young moonbound. It is transformation. The goddess touched her nose to Theodore's chest, to the wound that had killed him. But I agree, this wolf has earned a choice. The same choice I offer to all who serve me with true courage. The goddess's light intensified, pouring into Theodore's body. His chest rose with an involuntary breath. His heart gave a single beat. Then another. His gray eyes opened, confused and disoriented, looking up at a wolf made of moonlight and ancient power. Theodore Garrison. The goddess's vibrations resonated through him. You have died in service to the balance. You have spoken the name that freed my enemy from his torment. You have given your life so that another might keep her power. Theodore's hands moved weakly, signing. Am I dead? Not anymore. I have brought you back, because you have earned a choice that few wolves receive. The goddess's form shifted again, becoming a woman with kind eyes that somehow contained entire constellations. I can heal you as you are deaf but alive, whole but unchanged. You would return to the world as the wolf you have always been. Or, Theodore signed, reading the implication in her pause, or I can remake you, give you what you have lived without. A hearing. The ability to perceive sound as other wolves do. To hear your mate's voice. The wind in the trees. The howl of your pack. Silence stretched across the crater. Every wolf present held their breath. Lyra most of all. Her hands frozen mid-sign, waiting. This was it. The chance to be fixed. To become what his father had always wanted. What the pack had always expected. To stop being the deaf wolf and just be a wolf. Theodore looked at Lyra. At her violet eyes that had seen him as valuable from the very first day. At the hands that had taught him to weaponize his difference rather than apologize for it. At the woman who'd chosen to fight beside him instead of sacrifice herself for him. Then he looked at the goddess and signed with absolute certainty. I choose to remain deaf. A collective gasp rippled through the witnesses. Even Lyra looked shocked. You would refuse this gift? The goddess's tone held no judgment, only curiosity. It's not a gift if it erases who I am, Theodore signed. My deafness isn't something that needs fixing. It's the reason I could do what hearing wolves couldn't. It's how I learned to perceive the world in ways others never will. His hands moved with growing confidence. And it's part of why she loves me, not despite what I am, but including all of what I am. Lyra's tears started fresh, but these were different, not grief, but overwhelming emotion that had no single name. Wise beyond your years. The goddess's form shifted to pure light, warm and approving. You have learned what takes most wolves' lifetimes to understand, that difference is not deficiency, that adaptation is not weakness, that the moon speaks in more languages than sound alone. So you'll heal him as he is? Lyra signed desperately. Better. The goddess's light poured into Theodore again, and this time he felt something fundamental shifting inside him. I will heal him and gift him with what he has truly earned. Not hearing, but something more valuable. Theodore gasped as power flooded through him. His chest wound closed, bones knitting back together, exhaustion burning away like morning fog. But more than that, he could feel his connection to the earth, to vibrations, to the frequencies he'd learned to read, all of it amplifying to levels he'd never imagined possible. You are now what your people once called a moon seeker, the goddess explained. A wolf who hears not with ears but with spirit. You will perceive vibrations that other wolves cannot, will sense truth and lies through the resonance they create, will feel the intentions of those around you before they act on them. Theodore stood, his body whole and stronger than it had ever been. He could feel everything: Lyra's rapid heartbeat 20 feet away, the council wolves' fear and awe at the crater's edge, even the small vibrations of insects in the newly healed earth. The world had exploded into clarity that made his previous senses seem like shadows of perception. Your deafness remains, the goddess continued, but it is no longer a limitation. It is the foundation of a power that will make you invaluable to the wolf world. Packs will seek your counsel. Alphas will request your judgment. You will be what you were always meant to be. Not a broken prince, but a bridge between the old ways and the new. What about Lyra? Theodore signed, his first thought as always turning to her. The goddess turned her attention to the moonbound, who still knelt in the crater's center, her power dimmed but not diminished. You have kept your connection to me, kept your birthright. But more than that, the goddess touched Lyra's forehead, and the silver omega collar that had been discarded at the crater's edge dissolved into silver dust. You are free. No pack can claim you. No alpha can bind you. You are moonbound by choice, not by birth or duty. Where you go, what you do, who you love, all of it is yours to decide. Lyra looked at Theodore, her violet eyes shining with tears and hope, and a future that suddenly stretched out before them, unlimited and theirs. The council tried to object, of course. Vera stepped forward, her signs sharp and political. The moonbound belongs to Silvercrest Pack. They have territorial rights. The moonbound belongs to no one but herself. The goddess's response was final. And any pack that tries to claim her will answer to me personally. Vera wisely fell silent. The goddess turned to address all assembled: the council wolves, the spirits of the 7 freed warriors who'd gathered to witness, even Nira's translucent form, which had grown more solid in the goddess's presence. Let it be known across all territories. The Deadlands are healed, the curse is broken, and 2 wolves, 1 deaf, 1 moonbound have done what armies could not. They will be honored, protected, and any who seek to harm them will face my wrath. With that declaration, the goddess began to fade, her light dimming back to normal moonlight. But before she disappeared entirely, she turned back to Theodore one final time. One more gift, young moonseeker, for the question you did not ask but deserve answered. Theodore felt something shift, and suddenly he could see her, not a projection or illusion, but a true vision. His mother, Luna Garrison, standing beside the goddess. She looked younger than in any memory. Peaceful and whole. Luna's hands moved in sign language. My son. My beautiful, perfect son. I need you to know I didn't die because of you. I died because I couldn't forgive myself for ever thinking you were less than perfect. Tears streamed down her face. Every moment I looked at you with disappointment. Every time I made you feel broken. Those are my failures, not yours. You were the blessing I prayed for. I was just too afraid to accept the form that blessing took. Mom, Theodore signed, his own tears flowing freely now. I've watched you from the spirit realm. Watched you become everything I was too weak to see you could be. Luna's signs were filled with pride. You are more than I ever hoped. And I am so sorry it took my death for me to understand that. I forgive you, Theodore signed. Don't. Luna signed back gently. Don't forgive me easily. Remember what my failure cost you. And when you have children of your own, she glanced at Lyra with a knowing smile. Remember that difference is not something to mourn. It's something to celebrate. The vision faded, Luna's form dissolving back into moonlight. But Theodore felt lighter than he had in 18 years. His mother hadn't died hating him. She'd died regretting that she'd ever made him doubt himself. It wasn't everything he'd needed, but it was enough. The council tried to negotiate, tried to create terms and conditions for Theodore and Lyra's freedom. But the goddess's declaration had been clear, and not even Vera was foolish enough to defy a direct divine mandate. In the end, they settled on a compromise that Theodore actually found acceptable. He would serve as neutral mediator between pacts when disputes arose. His ability to sense truth and lies, to read intentions through vibrations, made him uniquely qualified to judge conflicts fairly. In exchange, the council would provide territory, resources, and protection. It's not what I imagined, Theodore signed to Lyra as they stood at the crater's edge, watching the sun rise over the healed deadlands for the first time in 3 centuries. Playing politics, serving pacts that would have rejected me a month ago. But, Lyra signed, reading the unspoken continuation, but it's a life where I'm valued for what I am, not tolerated despite it. Theodore turned to face her fully. And it's a life I get to build with you. If you'll have me. Lyra's laugh was silent to him. But he felt it through the vibrations of her body, felt the joy radiating from her like warmth. Theodore Garrison, you impossible, stubborn, beautiful wolf. Her signs were quick, emphatic, full of emotion. You died and came back, and your first concern is whether I'll stay with you. I want to do this right, Theodore signed. No manipulation. No circumstance forcing us together. Just a choice. Your choice. Then here's my choice. Lyra stepped closer, her hands moving with absolute certainty. I choose you. Not because I have to. Not because you saved me. But because you're the first person who ever saw me as powerful instead of property. Because you trusted me with truth, instead of protecting me from it. Because you're proof that being different makes you stronger, not weaker. She pressed her forehead against his, and Theodore felt her heartbeat synchronize with his own. A vibration that spoke louder than any words. I choose you, she signed again. Every day. For as long as you'll have me. That's a long time, Theodore signed, his hands trembling with emotion. Moonseekers live even longer than normal wolves. We might have centuries together. Good. Lyra's violet eyes sparkled with mischief and love. That's barely enough time for me to teach you all the trouble we're going to cause. 6 months later, the territory the council granted them sat on neutral ground between 3 major pack territories. A deliberate choice that emphasized Theodore's role as mediator. They'd built a home there, simple but comfortable, with a library that was rapidly filling with books on wolf history, moonbound traditions, and ancient magic. Lyra spent her days researching her bloodline's knowledge, writing down everything her mother had taught her so it wouldn't be lost. She performed rituals not because Pax demanded it, but because she chose to honor the goddess who'd freed her. Theodore spent his days traveling between territories, settling disputes, training young wolves who showed unusual sensory abilities. He was teaching a new generation that different didn't mean broken, that adaptation was strength, not weakness. But their nights, those belonged to each other. They were in the library when Theodore felt the familiar vibration of his father's approach. Alpha Rowan hadn't visited in the 6 months since the Deadlands, though he'd sent formal messages of congratulation through council channels. He's here, Theodore signed to Lyra. My father. Do you want me to stay? Please. They met Rowan at the door. The Alpha looked older somehow, his gray hair more prominent, the weight of leadership sitting heavier on his shoulders. His hands moved in stiff, unpracticed signs. May I come in? Theodore stepped aside, letting his father enter. They sat in the library, the same room where Theodore had once hidden from his pack's judgment, now a sanctuary he'd built with his own hands. I owe you an apology, Rowan signed. the movements clumsy but sincere. Several apologies. A lifetime's worth. Yes, Theodore signed simply. You do. Rowan flinched but nodded. I was afraid. Your entire life, I was afraid. Afraid of what other alphas would think. Afraid of seeming weak. Afraid that loving you as you were would somehow make me less of a leader. His hands trembled. I let that fear make me cruel. Make you feel broken when you were just different. I know. Theodore signed. And he did. His moonseeker senses could feel his father's genuine regret, the years of shame and guilt finally breaking through the pride. The council speaks of you with respect now. Fear, even. They call you the moonseeker, the deaf prophet, the bridge between worlds. Rowan's signs were heavy with irony. Everything I wanted you to be, you became, but only after I pushed you away. I didn't become this for you, Theodore signed. I became this because I stopped trying to be what you wanted and started accepting what I was. I know. Rowan looked around the library, at the life Theodore had built. I came here to tell you that Silvercrest would welcome you back. Thorn has struggled as heir. The pack respects strength, and he lacks your courage, your wisdom. A pause. They ask for you, Theodore. They want you to come home. Theodore felt Lyra's hand on his shoulder, her support silent but absolute. He looked at his father, this man who'd defined so much of his pain but who was, in the end, just a wolf who'd made mistakes. I am home, Theodore signed. This place, with her, building something new, this is home. Silvercrest is where I was born, but it's not where I belong anymore. Rowan's face crumpled with grief he could no longer hide. Then I've lost you. You lost me the day you chose pride over love. Theodore signed, not cruelly, but truthfully. But that doesn't mean we can't build something new. I'm not the son you wanted. But I could be, someone you're proud to know. If you're willing to let go of who you thought I should be. I am proud, Rowan signed, the words clearly difficult. I should have said it years ago. I'm proud of who you've become. Even if I had nothing to do with it. Especially because I had nothing to do with it. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a start. After Rowan left, Theodore stood with Lyra on their porch, watching the moon rise over their territory. He felt her signing against his back. Are you okay? Yes. He signed back. I finally am. No regrets? About not going back to Silvercrest? About staying here with me? Theodore turned to face her, his hands moving with absolute conviction. The greatest gift the goddess gave me wasn't healing my wounds or making me a moonseeker. It was you, your choice to see me as I am. Your courage to fight beside me. Your love that never asked me to be anything but myself. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever signed to me. Good, Theodore signed with a slight smile. Because I plan to spend the next century coming up with better ones. She kissed him then. And Theodore felt it not just with his lips but with every enhanced sense the goddess had granted him. Felt her heartbeat, her warmth, her love resonating through every fiber of his being. He'd been born deaf in a world that valued hearing above all else. He'd been called broken, incomplete, unworthy. But standing here with Lyra, with purpose and power and a future they'd chosen for themselves, Theodore Garrison had never felt more whole. Epilogue, the legacy. Years later, when young deaf wolves began appearing in packs across the territories, they weren't called broken anymore. They were called moonseekers. And their parents would bring them to a territory on neutral ground, to a library filled with ancient knowledge, to meet a deaf wolf with gray eyes who would teach them that silence was sacred, that different was powerful, that they were exactly what they were meant to be. Theodore and Lyra trained them all, passing down the techniques from journals written by moonbound healers and the wisdom earned through impossible trials. They taught vibration reading, air sense, the art of perceiving truth through resonance. But most importantly, they taught them to love themselves as they were. And in the evenings, when lessons were done and young wolves had returned to their packs, Theodore and Lyra would sit together under the moon, he unable to hear her voice, she unable to make him anything but what he was, and they would sign to each other all the words that mattered. I choose you. I see you. You are enough. You are home. And the moon goddess, watching from her silver throne, would smile at the two wolves who'd proven that love didn't fix people, it freed them. We've reached the end, dear viewers. Now tell me, what was your favorite moment from Theodore and Lyra's journey? Was it the first shift, the Hall of Mirrors, the final sacrifice? Comment below, and let's celebrate this story together. And if you want more tales like this, that like button helps more than you know.